Minsan ang nabansagan ang Pilipinas bilang Asia's rising tiger dahil sa patuloy na paglago ng ating ekonomiya na siyang nakatawag sa pansin ng iba't ibang bansa dito sa Asia at maging sa ibang panig ng mundo. Kung dati itinuturing na sick man ang Asia, ngayon unti-unti na ang pagbangon ng ating bansa dahil sa mga inisyatibong nagpapalawi pang lalo sa good governance na nagbigay daan upang dumami ang mga investment sa Pilipinas. At ngayong araw, isa na namang mahalagang kansa ang matutunghayan natin. Ito ang pagbisita ng isa sa mga kinikilalang pinakamakapangyarihang leader sa buong mundo, si Dr. Jim Yong Kim, ang presidente ng World Bank Group. Magandang umaga Pilipinas, ako po si Elena Luna at live mula rito sa Palasyo ng Malacañang. Samahan niyo kaming saksihan ang kauna-unahang pagbisita ng Pangulo ng isang kilalang institusyon sa buong mundo, ang World Bank. Kami po ay napapakinggan at napapanood ninyo ng live sa PTV, IBC at Radyo ng Bayan at via live streaming sa rtbm.gov.ph. At ngayon po ay tunghayan natin ang unang sesyon ng Daylight Dialogue.
Yung malapit sa bituka. But we wonder, would this woman care about good governance or open data? Would she care that open data will make people more proactive, lead to better engagement and greater transparency? Would she care that these reforms will bring accountability and people participation? That her government is currently breaking down barriers or changing the way things have been done for decades to fulfill the promise, kung walang korap, walang mahirap? Probably not. And not one of us in this room could and should blame her. We do our work, we break down walls, we go as far as putting ourselves in political danger to serve the country and this old lady, whether they appreciate what we do or not, whether they respect our efforts or not, whether they understand it or not. As they say, the sun rises every day, although we do not see it all the time. Its journey across the sky puts heavenly bodies in their proper places, and human beings go about their own way without realizing how much the sun made their day in more ways than one. Sometimes people fight those who strive to help them. In our nation's quest for good governance, it is hard for people to determine whether they are following the wisdom or madness of the crowds. Besides, Filipinos are vocal, opinionated, and eloquent people. We make no qualms about speaking out to let the government know how we feel. That is how it should be. We have paid a dear price for freedom of speech. And one of our signs of progress is that we can use it to express our thoughts. The old lady in the hat who has been suffering for 31 years or maybe more may not seem to care. She, like the rest of our nation, may fight or criticize, tear down rather than collaborate, participate in polemic attacks. Yet we should go on because it is our duty. The fight for good governance and transparency continues, even in an environment when there is a vacuum of recognition and appreciation. In the midst of all the confusion, we must not forget for whom we toil. I am grateful, however, that today, our partners in development, the World Bank, the civil society community, our business community, and the various government agencies are creating space for discussion and reducing the size of that vacuum. In a similar forum 2 days before he died, my husband Jesse said, and I quote, "Good governance can be the conclusion of our unfinished revolution. This revolution can be anchored on people like you who serve rather than criticize, collaborate rather than divide, build up rather than tear down, people who engage to understand." End of quote. Thank you for coming over this morning and for taking the extra mile to engage, to understand. Let today's conversation flow that we may learn and bring solutions to our nation's problems. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Congresswoman Lenny. At this point, allow me to share with everyone, the overview for the set of activities for this morning. We will begin our conference with the session On the Road to Good Governance, Taking Stock and Moving Forward, which will be moderated by Mr. Coco Alcuaz, who presently anchors Business Nightly on the ABS-CBN News channel. Sitting as panelists for this session are Undersecretary Manuel L. Quezon III of the Presidential Communications Development and Strategic Planning Office, and Undersecretary Richard Moya of the Department of Budget and Management. Both Undersecretaries Quezon and Moya are part of the Open Data Philippines Task Force. Our third panelist, meanwhile, is a known professor and journalist. We have Mr. Randy David. Our fourth panelist, representing the business sector, is Mr. Ramon Del Rosario Jr., chairman of the Makati Business Club and the Integrity Initiative. Prior to the afternoon sessions, His Excellency Benigno S. Aquino III, President of the Philippines, and Dr. Jim Yong Kim, the President of the World Bank, will be joining us. Dr. Kim will deliver his remarks. This will be followed by a keynote by President Aquino. After the keynote address, there will be a short question and answer session with both the President and Dr. Kim. After this, we will proceed to Heroes Hall, where lunch will be served. This is also where our afternoon sessions will be held. Ladies and gentlemen, all our plenaries will follow a single format. The moderator will present a series of questions or premises to which our panelists will respond. An hour will be allotted for this free exchange of ideas, and at the end of it, the moderator will provide a synthesis on the topic at hand. That being said, let us begin our first session, which will focus on the reforms initiated by government, specifically as regards the Open Government Partnership, and how this can become a vehicle to carry out greater reform across society. On this note, let us welcome our moderator, Mr. Coco Alcuaz, and our panelists, Undersecretary Manolo Quezon, Undersecretary Richard Moya, Mr. Randy David, and Mr. Ramon Del Rosario Jr.
Thank you, Abby. Good morning. I was a bit hesitant to, when they told me I'd be moderating the three panels, because
Natutunghayan niyo po ngayon ang pagdating dito sa palasyo ni Dr. Jim Yong Kim, ang presidente ng World Bank. Dumating po siya dito at sinalubong ni Finance Secretary Cesar Purisima at patungo na po siya ngayon sa President's Hall ng Malacañang para sa courtesy call para kay Pangulong Aquino. Kabilang po sa delegasyon ng World Bank President ang Vice President for East Asia and Pacific ng World Bank Group na si Mr. Axel Van Trossenberg. Nandito rin po sa palasyo sa panig naman po ng Pilipinas ay makakasama ni Pangulong Aquino. Bukod po kay Finance Secretary Cesar Purisima, ay nandito rin po si DFA Undersecretary Laura Del Rosario na kumakatawan para kay DFA Secretary Albert Del Rosario. Makakasama rin po sa courtesy call ng World Bank President kay Pangulong Aquino sina Budget Secretary Florencio Abad, si NEDA Director General Arsenio Balisacan, si Presidential Spokesperson Edwin Lacerda, si US Ambassador to the ang Ambassador ng Pilipinas sa Amerika na si Jose Quisha Jr. at ang Gobernador ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas na si Governor Amando Tetangco.
Beside him is Budget Undersecretary Juan Moya,
Si Dr. Jim Yong Kim po ang ika-12 presidente ng World Bank. Siya ay naluklok sa pwesto noong July 1, taong 2012. Bago naging presidente ng World Bank si Dr. Kim ay pangulo muna siya ng Dartmouth College, isang kilalang education institution sa Amerika. Siya rin ay co-founder ng Partners in Health o PIH, isang Boston-based non-profit organization working with poor communities. Siya rin po ay dating direktor ng HIV/AIDS Department ng World Health Organization. Pinangunahan din niya ang isang inisyatibo na tinatawag na 3x5. Ito ang first ever global goal for AIDS treatment na naglalayong tulungan ang 3 milyong HIV patients noong taong 2005. Tunghayan na po natin ang unang bahagi ng Daylight Dialogue na nagaganap dito sa Palasyo.
Rotarary's award for Opinion Writer of the Year. Before this, Undersecretary here at Malacañang for Communications. Please join me in welcoming our panel this morning. Let me begin with Undersecretary Bon Moya. Bon, in 3 minutes or less, could you tell us why and how you are trying to make the budget and the government finances more transparent in order to allow the people to participate in that process?
But before that, can someone take a picture? Yes. I'm a bit starstruck with the panel. The why, the good we're trying to aim is trust. That's the why. And it's not just trust of the people to government. It's also the trust of the bureaucracy to the people. And transparency, we felt, was the best tool to build that trust, both on the strategic and on the long term. The how, whatever we can get our hands in. So legally, we added a provision in the General Appropriations Act called the Transparency Seal provision that mandates all government agencies to publish in their websites the last 3 years of their financial statements, all the officers, their contact numbers, all procurements, all winning bids. So that's the law. Technologically also, we have introduced in many of our systems many of these transparencies. Specific is in the PhilJEP's portal where all the government procurement is done. They are mandated to publish all bids and publish all winning bids in that one. We're also modernizing that as well. We've also tried to utilize the social media in terms of our outreach to get this information out. A good case point is when Congress receives the NEP, the National Expenditure Program, a minute after that it's published on the web. And that's never been done before. Normally, it's a volume of all those. If you're lucky, you go to Congress, you get a copy, and then you bring it home. But now it's published, and it's all downloadable. And then we progress from there. First, it was all PDF files. PDF files meaning just image files. Now we're publishing the budget in machine-readable format, meaning Excel, CSV. That means that they can download it, parse it, pivot it, turn it around. So those are the interventions we have tried to do, legal, technological, and then also we've engaged the civil society to make sure that what we say, we do, the receiving end of things that we have initiated. But we felt that that was the price that needs to be paid to generate trust.
Could you elaborate on how some of these things are painful and that you're on the receiving end of some of these things that you initiated? Give us one example.
All newspapers today, open it. Most of the time, it will show you criticisms of things that we have been publishing for quite a while.
Could you tell us, when you talk about, you started out by saying that the important thing about this or the motivation was trust. How did the government come to the realization that this was the way to address that issue? And why was that issue so important?
Well, the issue is extremely important because that's precisely the reason why the president was elected. There was lack of trust in the bureaucracy, and therefore they needed to find someone they can trust, and that's why we elected the president. So that is primarily the primary social contract. Transparency, because I guess at the core of any relationship, the foundation of any relationship must be trust. whether it's a husband-wife relationship, father-son relationship, and even govern and govern. I think those are fundamental elements that need to be there.
Before I ask the next question, by the way, if at any point during the conversation, anyone of you has a question, just please stand up by the mic, and if you need to wave your hands a little so I'll notice you, please do it and I'll call you. Could I ask Mr. Del Rosario, Bon was talking about engaging civil society, and MBC, Makati Business Club, which you head, is a prime mover in both Coalition Against Corruption and Integrity Initiative. I don't know how directly involved you are in both of those at this point, after initiating them. But how do you think the private sector, how do you think they have they used this new transparency, this new availability of data?
Well, first let me second the idea proposed by Undersecretary, which is this president and this administration was elected because the people, I think, was looking for a government it could trust. And I think the whole hallmark of this administration has been built on confidence, transparency, accountability, trust. But the private sector, I think, quickly came to the realization that if we're going to agitate the government for integrity, for accountability, for transparency, we need to do something about ourselves. We need to do something within our own ranks. And that is how the idea of the Integrity Initiative was born. This whole idea is that the private sector, the business community, needs to do its part to promote this culture of integrity in our society. And that really focuses principally on our own way of doing business, our own practices, our own code of conduct, our own moral standards. And so the Integrity Initiative was launched with the idea that we will go through several steps. First, entering into a pledge, an integrity pledge, follow that up with the adoption of a code of conduct, and then proceed to a process of getting yourselves evaluated, first by yourselves, and then by an external entity that will give you accreditation. That is sort of the sum total of the process, although it's not something that is very easy to develop. It is something that is designed to have meat instead of just asking people to sign a pledge. It is designed so that there is substance behind it. Now, this has developed a great following within the business community, and in the past 3 years, we've signed up now about 3,000 signatories, CEOs and corporations. We've also entered into arrangements with various government entities. Something like 39 government departments and agencies have signed up with us. So, number one, we are fully supportive of the idea of transparency and accountability in government. We think a lot of gains have already been achieved by our country because of this. Our credit rating upgrades, our performance in various indices and surveys all show very significant improvements in terms of the perceptions of the outside world. But perhaps even more important, I think our business community have spoken with their money, and you can see this by the quality of investments that are taking place in our economy, by the amount of participation that is taking place now in the various PPP projects that are being brought to the public. It is all a demonstration of confidence that has developed. But as I said, the idea is the private sector has to do its part, and this Integrity Initiative, therefore, builds on the gains that have already been achieved by the government. So if the question is how have we done our part to participate in this effort to build this culture of integrity and accountability, I would respond that our first response has been the launching of this Integrity Initiative. Now, if I may just have one more minute. To push this forward, we've asked the government to create a framework that will allow government departments and agencies that want to participate in this more actively so that they can make it. Maybe let me backtrack a bit. The Department of Public Works and Highways has adopted the Integrity Initiative as a major component of its way of doing business with the private sector. And what Secretary Singson has done is he has made it a requirement for all contractors who wish to do business with the Department of Public Works and Highways to be participants in the Integrity Initiative. I would like to see this happen throughout the bureaucracy, if possible, as a sign that the government acknowledges the efforts of the private sector and puts value to the effort. Of course, it will have to be based on a credible accreditation system and a way of monitoring so that those who claim to be participants in this initiative are actually active participants and really doing their part. But given all that, if we could create that framework, I think this will go much further and hopefully encourage more of those in the private sector to participate. So let me stop at that and say that we are doing our part, and we're doing our part as aggressively as we can. Thank you.
Was it difficult, or how easy was it? I'm guessing it was easy, to convince Secretary Singson to sign on.
Not difficult at all. He was the one pushing us to move forward on this. We invited him. We've had 3 summits, and we've invited him, I think, to maybe all 3 of them. He's always one of our showcases in terms of how business can be done well and can be done with integrity and can be done efficiently within the confines of a government bureaucracy. And I think he has shown by example that you can do it. You can do it. You can bring in reforms without sacrificing efficiency. And so he is really a firm believer in this, and so it was not a problem at all to convince him that this was an appropriate step. Secretary Purisima, if I may say, also is a very strong supporter of the Integrity Initiative, and I believe he has proposed to the economic cluster the adoption of this executive order that we're asking for.
Manol, I don't know how closely you monitor this, but have you seen a lot of people use the kind of information that Bon and your own office has put out there and parse it, analyze it?
Yes and no. I think we should start with the big picture that we're all operating under, at least, let's say, in the government when it comes to this. The first is that you have to accept that there is a certain level of ignorance and fear when it comes to the operations of government. When I was working in the media, the frustration was, where do you find information? And it is sort of scattered and hidden in a way calculated to frustrate the person looking for even the simplest data. On the part of the ordinary citizen, anything from applying for a passport or birth certificate, any of the little bureaucratic requirements that make life so difficult, again, there is no single place or even an attitude of helpfulness when it comes to these things. That applies to the ignorance part. The fear part is because everything is opaque and because everything is written in bureaucratic language, there is an immediate suspicion that something funny must be going on. And going into government, that is an attitude that at first informs your every action until you realize that then you are facing a bureaucracy who are there for life, and often as frustrated as you are, but getting to the point where you realize that they are as frustrated as you are, and therefore you can work together, takes some time. Then it becomes a matter of continuously finding ways to address the problem from 2 levels. There is what you can say is the macro level, the level of policy, the level of data and information, which is not sexy, which requires an equal amount of time for the consumer as it does for the producer, and the sort of retail side of things, where it is your ordinary citizen having hysterics because they're about to go to Saudi Arabia, and yet here's yet another piece of paper they have to get, and they don't know where to call, and when they do call, they're out for lunch, and when they line up, they're told to go to the next window, and when they get to the next window, they go to the next building, and then to the next town. So in looking for all of these things, it requires navigating your peers, and in this case, it is those coming into government with the best of intentions, those already there, who are also, you have to realize, operating with the best of intentions, and the public on so many levels. What we did, for example, if there is the official gazette, which was our first open government initiative together with Pera ng Bayan and explaining the budget. It's rather abstract. The first thing is you have to have a single place where people can go, where all the documents of government are placed, knowing that no one in the government has a complete set of anything. Having the numbers out there, knowing a very distinct problem that is perhaps a Malay thing or part of our culture, which is sometimes it's not out of a desire to be untransparent, it's out of a sense of hiya or shame. No one wants to have a document out there where some nitpicker is going to find that their math was wrong, or their English was wrong, or their Filipino was wrong, and it leads to a whole series of bureaucratic sort of blocking of things. And of course, all the private sector or academe or the media don't recognize this. Now, so to cut the long and short of it, it's then finding the best practices that can sort of reassure everyone up and down the line that it is not just Bon Moya coming up with ideas in the shower or me just applying sort of theories I picked up from somewhere, but best practices that have been proven to work. And there you find a commonality and a practicality of things where the bureaucracy likes rules. They like everything written down. They like it predictable. It has been probably thought out somewhere else, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and therefore you avoid stepping into a situation where someone feels that they're just being told to do something out of whimsy. And there is where we found a remarkable reaction. The media, for example, I'm bold enough to say appreciates the fact that they can go to a single website where all the issuances, the reports, even the press conferences are all listed down. They have a place to go to for the numbers. People in academia and I've had former colleagues in the Inquirer say, we appreciate the fact that even the sort of obscure things that maybe the public is not too excited about, but a professor might want to see, are finally sort of being taken out of the drawers and put online. So it is this sort of ruthless and constant search for relevance that I think is crucial and can be tiring, as one point out.
Last night, you put out the list of the DAP projects. That is something that people had been clamoring for, waiting for, etc. Do you have feedback as of this morning of how many people actually checked that out, or were they just on Twitter saying, finally it's there?
This is the interesting thing. You know, there's always a saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot force them to drink. One person on Twitter, not from the government, pointed out, hey, everyone has been asking for the list, but only 697 people actually bothered to look at it. And it is an
I was
interesting,
one.
well, you better. But this is the interesting thing. You are by doing these initiatives, you are challenging the status quo. The status quo of media, where it is easier to get a soundbite than to read the document. The status quo of the politicians, where it is easier just to ping-pong your statements, and even of online citizens. It's easy, for example, when we were doing, we're constantly refining a system for citizens where they ask for help. And the citizen can ask for help, but at a certain point, they have to do something for themselves. And I'm seeing that people are getting to that point, but it is a constant struggle with sort of ingrained behaviors.
Randy, Manolo was talking about the bureaucracy, and you had a column recently on the normalization of corruption. And I think you pointed out three things to look at when you look at corruption. One is there's this kind of subculture of corruption going on, also the motivations of people there. But the one that interested me was when you said that we have a weak control system and a very strong bureaucracy, which makes it a fertile ground for corruption. Are these two, is a bureaucracy naturally going to be against transparency initiatives of the kind that Bon and Manolo are talking about, because they want to protect that fertile ground?
I think you're raising two issues here which are separate. the weak control system of government and transparency. Let me first address, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. I don't know which hat I am wearing, that of an academic or of a journalist. If I am a journalist, why am I here? Am I supposed to be one of the friendly journalists? I hope I'm fair. But I prefer to think of myself as a sociologist who is dabbling in journalism. The website of the DBM with regard to DAP was uploaded only last night after the president's speech. I was the 12th visitor. Nobody knew that it was there. In fact, it took Channel 2 to announce that the list of 116 projects is already there. No? So if people are complaining that only 600-something visitors bothered to look, it's because it's been only a few hours. And 600 visitors is not few. It's a lot. There's a tremendous interest in this. I visited it, and I must say, in some portions, it's not very instructive, not very helpful. It must have been put together rather hastily. For one thing, people want to know exactly which of those 116 items have been the subject of congressional appropriation. In some items explicitly say that this has been funded by congressional appropriation to the tune of 250 million pesos or thereabouts. So I assume that where congressional appropriation is not mentioned, those are new projects, which means by the reckoning of the Supreme Court, those are illegal. I don't know what kind of concerns go into the publication of official documents like that, but I think you have to be a little more careful. Media is not necessarily adversarial, but I think it is easier for government to adjust to the code of media rather than for media to change its code. No, just as it would be easier for any administration to try to adapt to the political realities in which government is supposed to accomplish its national goals than to change the nature of politics. My view is, just to address the whole question of transparency and good governance here, my view is that most good governance advocates in any country suffer at least from two maladies. The first malady is the technocratic malady. They think that just because the policy measures they're introducing represent the best practices you can find in the most advanced societies, therefore, they should be acceptable to the rest of the population. And if they are not, then that population is either ignorant or uninformed. The other malady is what I call the moralistic malady. Just because you have good faith and good intentions does not necessarily mean that you are going to be able to implement these policy measures. To my mind, most good governance advocates regard political realities as externalities, when in fact the whole purpose, I think, of any government, after you get things right, after you get your goals right, is to be able to use your political capital, your mandate, your authority, in order to secure laws that will allow you to accomplish the things that you set out to do, and not just during your term, but beyond your term. In the situation that we are in, getting those laws passed is one of the most difficult things in the world, because that means that you have no choice but to work within the existing political realities, realities that reflect the very nature of our society, which I've always argued is a very pre-modern, hierarchical, feudal society. The class divisions and disparities in our society are just so scandalous to anybody. Why would you expect a very modern type of political system in a situation like this? But you have to work within those realities. And I think that many good governance advocates are just too impatient about getting their policy measures through and completely unmindful of the political realities within which they must work. If you are unmindful of these realities, you inevitably run out of two things by which we should accomplish your goals. One is money, the other one is loss. I think in this particular instance, the situation that we face with regard to the DAP, you've obviously run out of loss, which is the reason why the Supreme Court is telling you, look here, you don't have much legal basis to stand on, although that is arguable. And I think it is just right for the President to file a motion for reconsideration on this. I don't know, I'm sure I'm getting around the issue that you posed for me, Coco, but I've always thought of good governance as just one of three elements of the political system. And there's very little appreciation among good governance advocates, and that include not only people in government, but also in the non-government sector, that good governance is part of the political system. The other two parts are politics proper, the political contests of visions and of people, and the public sphere, of which the mass media are a part, academia, the non-government sector, the civil society organizations are a part. And all these three operate according to their own respective codes. You have to work. If you are in charge of governance, if you are the president, you've got to work within the exigencies of such a political
Pagtatapos ng
system.
naging courtesy call ni World Bank President Dr. Jim Yong Kim kay Pangulong Aquino na nagaganap po, ang nakikita niyo po ngayon ay nagaganap sa President's Hall ng Malacañang, kung saan nakasama ng Pangulo sa pagsalubong sa Presidente ng World Bank, sina Finance Secretary Cesar Purisima, Budget Secretary Lorenzo Abad, DSWD Secretary Dinky Soliman, si Presidential Spokesperson Edwin Lacerda. Nandito rin po sa President's Hall ang ambassador ng Pilipinas sa Amerika, si Ambassador Jose Quisha Jr., pati na rin po ang gobernador ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas na si Amando Tetanco Jr. Sa side naman po ng World Bank, kasama po ni Dr. Jim Yong Kim, ang Vice President ng East Asia and Pacific na si Mr. Axel Van Schwarzenberg, pati na rin si Mr. John Donnelly, ang Communications Advisor ng Office of the President ng World Bank Group. Binabalik naman po namin ngayon ang ating programa sa Daylight Dialogue na nagaganap ngayon sa Rizal Hall ng Palasyo ng Malacañang.
Lawyers who will say that one thing or other, that they have to, their legal consequences. There are people who are compiling the data who up to the very last minute are double checking, triple checking, and therefore don't want the data out because they will then be attached to that data and have to stand by it even though they're uncertain. There are political considerations. And at the end of the day, it presents a fundamental crisis for those who along the way have been pushing that let us be open, let us be transparent, which is there are consequences. Possibly harmful to those who have been advocating that transparency in the first place. I'll give you another example, which is when we were discussing the Freedom of Information Act. One of the biggest concerns that emerged, and this was rather late in the game, when the President was asking us to study the proposed measure, which was the bureaucracy simply viewed it as yet another layer of work. And this was something that none of the advocates had considered. on either side of whether in and out of government. And it became an item that was crystallized in this comment that was given to me by one bureaucrat who handles an agency where they regularly process a lot of requests from the public. If we are to go online and if we are to respond to people, there's a rule in our laws that says within 15 days you must respond. And we get 100,000 requests in a single day. Who is going to do that? We're going to have half our people attending to this. And it is a legitimate concern because there are existing penalties. Now, I guess the main point here is that for every effort to change the status quo, there comes a point where those who have been pushing for a change in the status quo are in danger of becoming the new status quo themselves. And unless there are mechanisms, whether it is in terms of institutionalizing it in a way that keeps things percolating, and that is often by having non-government participants to sort of keep those who are increasingly turning into government mandarins sort of more grounded, you will reach that crisis point, and it in turn faces the danger of either withering on the vine, which is the sort of big elephant in this room. How can we continue the initiatives that are showing such promise? And it will reach a point where those who were formerly pioneering these things start losing steam and start retreating into the same bureaucratic mindset, knowing that not everyone is going to be happy regardless of what you do. Regardless of however anyone puts together a list, someone will always be unhappy with it. And when that unhappiness is expressed, it can either harm those who have been pushing it, because then everyone else who was skeptical was saying, look, you were transparent and it just caused more problems. Or it will start pushing the envelope into a situation that no one was expecting, including the advocates themselves. And I just wanted to put that front and center, because if this discussion is to achieve anything, those are the two questions that must be addressed. How do you keep it going? And yet, how do you keep that thing from turning into the very problem that you were trying to fix in the first place?
Business groups are advocating the FOI bill. How do these concerns factor into that advocacy?
The administration started on the premise that it would be built around the ideas of transparency and accountability. And I guess in the simplest of terms, how can you advocate transparency and accountability and still not be in favor of a freedom of information bill? My advice to the administration from the beginning was deal with it. You've got to deal with the problems that you anticipate, but deal with it and try to put into the bill whatever safeguards are appropriate. I realize that there are many areas that should remain in the realm of confidentiality. I realize that there are many discussions that probably should not be exposed to the public. I realize that there are things like national security issues. But I also, on the other hand, insist that a freedom of information bill is really the foundation upon which we can really count on all of these reforms of transparency and accountability remaining in place, even if the administration that is in place is no longer as dedicated to the idea of transparency and accountability. So that's really what it's all about. I think you need to institutionalize it. I know it's difficult. I know that there are issues. But the response really is, let's deal with it and figure out what is the best solution, what is the best compromise, if you will, if we need to compromise to a certain extent. But let's put something in place that clearly indicates that we are in favor of people having the rights to ask or to demand information from its government.
I hope it's not too simplistic a question, but when the administration ends in 2016, it's able to put these websites and this information online and make it available, but doesn't have an FOI bill, what's the highest score or grade it can get?
That's a very difficult question to ask. But I think the real response I would like to give is there has to be a Freedom of Information bill so that the gains that have been achieved in terms of transparency and accountability have the best chance of being preserved.
Randy, would you agree?
I agree completely. With regard to the DAP list, I think the administration should have put out the list as soon as this was made public by, I mean, the whole existence of the disbursement acceleration program was being used as a kind of defense by Senator Estrada in his privileged speech. That was last year. It took, I mean, did the administration need several months to put together the data? President Aquino himself had said that by way of defense, that only 9% of the DAP funds went via the lawmakers. As soon as the president said that, then there should have been immediately a publication of those projects. Because the president himself had acknowledged it. By the way, it's more than 9% by your own data. The various local projects coursed through the lawmakers, which is what PDAF was all about, amounts to more than 9% of the total. But then the total kasi keeps changing, which incites precisely the kind of distrust that you were talking about, Manolo. I know, no, it's very difficult to govern. It's more easy to criticize. But you have to deal with that because you're in office. To me, declaring something as legal or illegal is far, far easier than for a government to govern. Governance is one of the most complex things in the world. It requires imagination, creativity, flexibility, shrewdness. But if you have a lot of political capital, you're beginning on a good foot. It should be possible to do the kind of enduring reforms that we are talking about here. But there are no two ways about it. If you want the reforms to be enduring, they have somehow to be drafted in the form of laws. And that means working with Congress, whether you like it or not. And that means having the kind of shrewdness, flexibility, imagination, and willingness to deal with saints and scoundrels in the legislature that we elected. It's a reality.
Bon, I know you wanted to interject a while ago.
I wanted to offer a glass of water to everyone, but there were two items introduced, published last night, the DAP list and an announcement that there are no classes today. Okay? That's part of transparency. Prior to today, people always wonder if they will send their kids to school. No one is complaining about that today. No one is talking about DAP, but everyone is happy that in the official gazette, there is an official announcement that everyone got their hands into saying that.
To be fair, there are some people who were still looking for it and did not know that this kind of information would be in the official gazette.
Which leads me to the second one. Clearly, there is an inequality of access to many things. One of them is information. That's the sweetest spot of all. That's the one we can address the most. 9 of every 10 Filipinos are in Facebook. A third of our population have access to broadband. That's a third, 90% of a third of our population. That's where they got the information that today there are no classes long before they went to bed last night.
Again, if there's any question from you, already one. Peter.
Manolo was complaining about the
Peter, in case there's anyone here, which I doubt, doesn't know you, could you introduce yourself?
Sorry. Peter Wallace, representing MAP today. Manolo was complaining about the bureaucracy, how you have to go from one window to another, one village to another, to handle things. And Randy was bringing up about the necessary freedom of information And the point, a very good point that I hadn't thought about before, 100,000 a day, who is going to do all that? The answer is very simple: computers. I have recommended for a long time now, and as many of us have, creation of a department of ICT. A department of ICT would bring together all the different systems within government today that exist and are not tied to each other. We need a holistic, integrated system. We need somebody in charge of that at cabinet level that can put it together. We are today in a world where the ICT is dominating everything we do and is one of the most important areas of the future, and we don't have a department to look after it. And yet it's the most successful part of this country's development. I'm told, I hope I'm wrong, the reason that the President has given is that we have too many departments. I couldn't agree more. We have too many departments. I can suggest many others we should get rid of. But the solution I have made is that we close the department of the DOTC. It has proved itself rather inutile in the past. But for a more fundamental reason, we don't need it for two reasons. One, transport can be moved to the DPWH, where it better fits. So the transport side of the public works development are two integrated systems. And communications is now a subsector of IT. So communications moves to DICT. So we closed down the DOTC, create a department of ICT, and move transport to DPWH, communications to DICT.
I thought Peter's suggestion would be to PPP it. Let me ask Bon and Manolo, how difficult would it be to organize a unit that would take care of that?
Okay, Bon is the computer geek, so I'm just going to speak about the human side of it. Because Bon, for example, is in charge of working with the Department of Science and Technology to get our servers up. He's, for example, doing the thing where we have to migrate all our government websites to the government's own servers. This hasn't been done. And you're dealing with independent IT kingdoms in every department, so he can talk about that.
What do you mean, right now, on whose servers are they?
It really depends on the department. Sometimes they have their own, sometimes they outsource it. There is no standard. There are no standards for security or whatever. From our end, because we're the communications arms, we do corporate identity. Because you should be able to identify a site, a government site, by the way it looks. It should navigate all the same way. They should all talk to each other in terms of the content, because the official gazette is the national government portal. And data.gov.ph is the data portal. So from that point of view, it is also difficult because you are dealing with individual bureaucracies who face the startling possibility that there might be redundancies because of obsolete skills that are no longer required, an innate desire not to be dictated upon. And if you think this is difficult on the national level, very few of us realize how much latitude the local governments have, and that they are very much independent of the national government. That being said, so in terms of the basic question of that data systems should be talking to each other. You even have to migrate from index cards to a database before the databases can even talk to each other. When there are Supreme Court decisions as well that you cannot even combine the data in terms of a national identity card, which might solve a lot of the red tape because of fears over martial law and privacy rights. My only point is this, that for every bureaucracy that exists, the desire to simply abolish them would lead to quite an interesting number of protests, as well as legal problems, as well as simply this human thing. Now, it is being done. And it is actually, to my mind, being done from our point of view, and I think Bon will agree, being done faster than anyone expected, because people turn out to be a lot more reasonable and cooperative than you expect. But the situation is daunting and does require a lot of patient hand-holding, which may not even result in immediate problems for the public being fixed. You're just talking about the bureaucracy's concern.
One, let me ask you, would a unit that is targeted to putting out information for the whole government help? And then after that, I'd like to ask Mr. Del Rosario, do you think the public sector can have a role, not just in using the data, but in putting out the data as well? Bon?
I will not answer your question directly. First, on the question of the DICT, I think
no one is answering my questions directly.
I think that's a policy decision beyond my pay grade. However, having said that, let me first tell everyone that we have tried it, and results can be made without having a DICT. We initiated this program called the MITHI, Medium Term Harmonization Initiative of All IT. That involves NEDA, the ICT office, our office, and we try to harmonize all of this from a budgetary point of view. The reason our systems are not interoperable is because the offices are not interoperable. So the first order of the day is not technology. The first order of the day is the C in ICT. Having said that, just to give you some information, the procurement service told us that the government spends about 3 billion on paper and ink alone every year, just on paper, more than the budget of many agencies. So we spend about $500 million pesos every year just on electricity expense alone on all the multiple data centers. So that means that it makes so much sense to centralize all of that. We have done that. ICTO has launched and is currently running the government cloud services that hopes to harmonize all ICT and all the added benefits of a singular security, singular, et cetera, et cetera. So we're doing that. We're working with other agencies. That's why we created the Open Government Task Force. We're working with them and told them no one gets any money until everyone sits down and talks together and proposes to us as a group. Because all problems are interagency. Poverty is not an agency issue. Transportation is not a singular agency issue. The economy, prosperity is not. These are interagency problems, and therefore we must attend to this on an interagency level. So we're happy and proud to say that we are moving forward in many harmonized. A system, 3 weeks ago, we have awarded the system for the Comprehensive Human Resource Information System, or CRIS. That's the Central National Payroll System. What does that do? First, we only buy one system that the national government agency can use. Second, it makes all the personnel transparent. And C, it gives us better idea of a third of our budget. A third of our budget is in PS. 10% efficiency on personnel. That's 10% of a third of our 2.0 something trillion expenditure. So those things are happening. Happening because, as Manolo said, these are not sexy things. These are not DAP things. So no one bothers and realizes that by just simply sitting down together for the last 2 years, we have saved the government billions and billions of pesos. But I guess these things, need some forum to discuss separately. But some of those things are being achieved. We're doing our best. There are 3 registries we need to build, and we need your help to do that. We need to have a registry of citizens, because that's the common reference for all services of government. Number 2, we need a registry of all juridical entities, corporations, cooperatives, NGOs, schools, government agencies. We need to have a uniform basis to ask each system that I want data on this and I use this reference code. And the last one, we need a registry of land, so that you can then link the land to the business, to the individual. These things are not yet happening. These things we need to work together. And contrary to whatever the policy issues is on the ICT, this
about the work they've been doing in terms of reforming the budgetary system, in terms of creating this platform of transparency and accountability. And I think it's fair to say that this administration has done a tremendous amount to improve the budgetary system in our country and to make it far more transparent anyway. How the private sector can assist is by being supportive, I would imagine. There are a lot of experts in the private sector who are available, who can be harnessed as consultants, as advisors, as people who can assist. There are groups who are willing to enter into discussions, engagements, to provide advice. I think that's the form by which we can take, and we can also be very supportive, and that's why I welcome the initiatives of the DBM to keep the private sector informed of the initiatives that they're taking, and to keep us informed of the progress that they have achieved, so that we can at least be knowledgeable about it and be as supportive as possible.
I'm going to attempt to ask Randy this question. If he doesn't answer it, which I know he won't, I'll ask it of the others. One of the themes that they want us to address is the institutionalization or the sustainability of these ideas, especially post-2016. All this talk and all this talk about good governance and transparency that's happening now, and all the progress that Mr. Del Rosario has said has happened despite the shortcomings. Do you think that's enough? There's enough momentum there so that that trend continues post-2016?
There is definitely a strong momentum for reforms in governance. But I will say what I said just a while ago. The only way you can make these reforms enduring is by institutionalizing them. And that means basically creating laws to encrust them in legislation. And that means working with the murky world of politics, one way or another. It's something that you cannot avoid if you are in governance. Politics is not an externality. It is part of the system with which you have to work. But just as you have to get those laws passed, and you have to go to Congress or the legislature to get those laws, you also have to get the good news out. And you can't do that alone by simply having websites. You have to deal with media. Media, therefore, is not an obstacle or impediment. Media does not necessarily have to be adversarial. You don't need to think of it as an adversary. Media is also an instrument, a tool, but it operates by its own code. And its code is not government's code. Its code is to tell you what's different, what's new. That is why in most instances, the shelf life of a piece of news would be no more than 2 weeks, except this Napoles thing, which has gone on for a year, which is truly remarkable. And that, to me, is an indication of the impatience of the population for lasting reform in government. A week ago, I got a sheaf of papers from the DBM, personally signed by Butch Abad, saying that I hope these papers will be useful, and if you can share them with your peers, for people to understand. To me, it is a good thing. It is a gesture that should have been done a long time ago. But I look at the papers. They're so technical. They're so dry that perhaps only an accounting professor might have the patience to go through them. But I struggled through them. I even looked at the references to the law, the administrative code, PD 1177, the Supreme Court decisions, and so on and so forth. But I must say it takes quite an effort to translate this into material that can easily be digested by the mass media. And that is not the fault of mass media. To me, it is the fault of the person or the agency that wants to communicate something, to prepare documents, data, that can easily be digested by people who are constantly in a hurry and under pressure to put out the news.
Manolo, unless I'm mistaken, Randy seems to be saying that the government is hesitant or refuses to deal with Congress, and is hesitant or refuses, maybe not refuses, or is could deal with could communicate with the media better.
Let me just say, I think the president has had more success with Congress than with the mass media.
Okay.
Okay. 2 ways I would tackle that. The first, in terms of the mass media, the president has always spoken of raising the tone of public discourse, because as media itself is confronting a crisis, which is the era of the mass sort of audience in many ways is shrinking or disappearing, particularly for the middle class. I mean, you still have a gigantic mass audience for TV shows and the networks, but the space allocated for news and current affairs has practically evaporated, or it's been ghettoized to ANC or places like that, and that's a...
We're a ghetto now.
Yeah, no, and I was saying that because it is no longer worthy of being part of the larger mix. And Randy had that problem with his shows. That being the case, precisely the competition to grab those precious few seconds of audience interest is much more ruthless. Government is very ill-equipped by instinct to do that. Why? First of all, government thinks wholesale and not retail. They will think of entire vast bureaucracies, but not of the individual person struggling to understand. When we, for example, try to innovate in terms of infographics and other ways to try to get the information across, this is an experiment. It is not, it is something that will require training. It requires getting people to join government at uncompetitive wages, because it's a skill set. And you know that it's very difficult to hold on to creative people because the world is their oyster. Now, in terms of what Randy was saying about this will all boil down to laws, and that's the only way you're going to institutionalize it, and it comes down to recognizing the fact that laws are made by who is able to mobilize the proper constituencies. And here, this is something I've always been very vocal about in terms of the private sector and everyone advocating, let's say, FOI or other laws, and Lenny knows this, which is that while media has been very, very dogged about pursuing it, it has not yet reached the point of convincing the lawmakers, who are the ones you're going to have to convince, that there is a wider constituency out there. And the political risks of FOI are simply too vast. I don't know if I'm going to lose my job over this, but anyway. For example, you could not make a big push for it on the eve of an election. Because as one congressman told me, how am I going to be putting things about myself online when there's no guarantee that my opponent has to do that? That is unfair. I had no answer. Eventually, there is an answer, which is if you run for public office, you should file the requisite information that a person who is incumbent will have to do, but good luck convincing people of that. The other, as Lenny saw in the discussions in Congress, was that there were some legitimate concerns. Okay, you can be transparent because what is the goal of media and the public? Follow the money. That is ultimately what everyone wants to know. But there are concerns. If I am going to put my statement of assets and liabilities online, as we would want in the draft bill, does that make your kids liable for kidnapping, or can people start besieging your home and that sort of thing? And it brought up legitimate privacy issues. Only after it was hammered out in repeated meetings that because there is an existing data privacy law that enables you to keep certain things. You know, it doesn't matter where you live as long as I know the value of your house and lot and how many houses and lots do you have. But that requires consultation. And it is this mobilization of constituencies that can be able to prove to people who have to be elected into office that it is worth their time, effort, and sticking their neck out for this, that will determine if these things last. If you are happy with data, if you are happy with mandating the publication of documents, then there has to be a consequent political net gain for any official who will join your advocacy. Otherwise, it will simply be viewed as a liability down the line, even by honest people.
Kakoko, let me just pose this quick challenge.
Quicker.
Sauce for the goose, sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander. There is a requisite to file government officials, SALN. What if that same requisite is done for all media? Should you take the challenge?
Well, the media is not the government. No.
But media is part of society that also requires transparency.
Oh, yes, but I mean, media, as I said, operates by a different code. We don't make decisions in the name of everybody.
Yes, but
we
you
don't
influence
exercise political power.
You influence minds and opinions as well.
Oh, does that mean that we should reveal our SALN? Incidentally, I reveal my SALN because I'm also part of the University of the Philippines and I have to file my SALN. No? Well, let me just turn very briefly to what Manolo said. Do you think that Philippine kidnappers check the SALNs of people before they decide to kidnap their children? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. No, but I think that would be not an adequate excuse to prevent silence from being, of government people from being published online. You know? But let me just say something positive about the current administration, because I don't want to end on a note of anxiety and apprehension, you know, about this. To me, there has never been an administration in our country that has been as transparent as the present Aquino administration. And that is not just because of the technology that is available, which is the internet, but it is also because this government was elected on the basis of daang matuwid. The very soul of daang matuwid, to my mind, is transparency. Unfortunately, for any person in that position of governance, transparency is both a source of strength as well as of vulnerability. I have always maintained the view that what got you into trouble with the Supreme Court was precisely the transparency that you manifested. How? Budget Circular 541, to me, was a transparent attempt to put in writing practices with regard to the budget that had always been rendered invisible by previous administrations. Nobody in his right mind puts on paper the impounding of savings and then what you wanted to do with the savings. You did under National Budget Circular. Is that 541? Creating the DAP?
I'm luckily dyslexic. I can't remember the numbers.
All right. But that's the budget circular. And it was that was declared unconstitutional projects themselves. If you had not given the Supreme Court the paper with which to crucify you, but that's because of transparency. It's something that you could not help. Precisely because this is the daang matuwid administration. But it's something that you have to deal with if you aim to govern differently. A part of yourself you've got to sacrifice, and I think, to my mind, it's still a small price to pay for the long-term promise of democratic reform in a society like ours. It's very difficult to move this society from where it is. And I salute this administration for doing everything that is possible to push this society forward. It may cost you popularity ratings, no? a drop in ratings, but you can console yourself with the fact that the president's approval rating is right now at 53. That of Obama is 41%. No president, to my recollection, in this country has been able to maintain the kind of approval and trust ratings that Pinoy has been able to maintain for more than 4 years. And that, to me, is remarkable.
This is a very good tone to be ending in. Let me ask, we have 1 minute to go. Let me ask Mr. Del Rosario if he has anything to add to that.
Yes, I just want to say that I agree that the level of transparency that this administration has manifested is really quite impressive and probably unsurpassed by others. This transparency and the credibility of its reform programs has really resulted in this momentum for reforms. And this in turn has translated into a momentum for economic progress. It would really be a pity if the problems that the administration is now encountering will translate into it retracting into a cocoon and saying, I am now going to be extremely careful and reluctant to move forward. Because, and this is really one of the reasons why I liked the president's speech last night. I think the president was adamant in saying, we did what we did because we believed it was for the good of the country. We did what we did because we believed we had a basis for it. If you now say that what we did is unconstitutional, that does not negate the fact that we did it on the basis of good faith and for the good of our country. Now, I would like that mindset to continue. I would like that mindset to continue translating into this administration, continuing its forward thrust and its forward momentum, so that the next 2 years do not become 2 years of a lame duck administration. I really would like to see the momentum of reform and economic progress and economic admiration by the rest of the world to continue, and I think that will continue if the administration does not get cowed by all of these problems that it is encountering. It must forge ahead, full steam ahead, with as much confidence as it has had all along. Thanks.
I was going to say join me in thanking our excellent panel. So if that was just for Mr. De Rosario, please join me in thanking our excellent panel. I'm surprised and sorry we didn't have more time for questions. The lesson is this afternoon, if you have a question, stand up quickly, okay? Thank you very much. I think the President will be coming in shortly.
Governance Challenge na nagaganap ngayon sa Palasyo ng Malacañang. Ang mga naging speaker po ngayong umaga sa first session ng Daylight Dialogue, the Good Governance Challenge, ay sina PCDSPO Undersecretary Manolo Quezon, Undersecretary Richard Moya, ang Chief Information Officer ng Transparency and ICT Initiative ng Department of Budget and Management, si Professor Randy David, isang sociology professor ng University of the Philippines sa Diliman, at si Mr. Ramon Del Rosario, ang chairman ng Makati Business Club. Kanina po ay pinag-usapan nila ang issue ng Disbursement Acceleration Program, kung saan nabanggit na ito po ay nakapost sa website. Sinabi rin po kanina ni Yusek Manolo Quezon na nagsikap ang Administrasyong Aquino na maging transparent sa pamamagitan ng official gazette na website kung saan maaaring ma-access ang mga impormasyon sa gobyerno, at nandito rin po ang list ng mga projects na nasa ilalim ng Disbursement Acceleration Program. Kanina din po ay nagkaroon ng question and answer portion kung saan may mga nagtanong dito sa audience na binubuo ng mahigit 200 mga bisita mula sa gobyerno, pribadong sektor, pati na rin sa mga NGOs. Meron din po tayong nakitang mga negosyante at miyembro ng diplomatic community. Kanina po ay nasaksihan din natin habang nagaganap itong first session ng Daylight Dialogue ang pagdating sa Pilipinas, at lalo na sa Malacañang ng presidente ng World Bank na si Dr. Kim. Matapos po ang courtesy call ay magtutungo na ang dalawang leader dito sa Rizal Hall para isagawa ang kani-kanilang speeches. In a matter of minutes po ay matutunghayan natin ang pag-address ng dalawang kilalang leader na ito sa bumubuo dito sa Daylight Dialogue sa Palasyo. Maghapon po ang gaganaping Daylight Dialogue ngayong araw na sinimula na kanina lamang ng first session. Mamaya naman po ay masasakihan natin ang second at third session kung saan isa sa mga speakers si Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales. Nagkaroon po tayo ng pagkakataon na makapanayam ang isa sa naging resource speaker sa first session na si Professor Randy David. Kasama po natin ngayon si Professor Randy David, isang sociologist sa University of the Philippines, Diliman. Isa po siya sa magiging speaker ngayong araw. Sir, magandang araw po.
Magandang umaga naman sa iyo.
Sir, kwentuhan niyo naman po kami, sir. Paano po tatakbo itong dialogue na to with you as resource person?
Sinabi sa akin na ito ay parang talk show tungkol sa reforma o pagbabago sa pamamahala ng ating bansa, no? O sa wikang Ingles ang tinatawag nilang governance, no? So malawak yung mga isyong tatalakayin, no? Ang naatasan ako na pag-isipang mabuti kung papaanong ang mga reformang nakamit, halimbawa, sa ilalim ng Administrasyong Aquino, ay may pagpapatuloy kahit na hindi na siya presidente. No? So, yun ang aking assignment. No? Sa aking palagay, kailangan isabatas mo ang mga ganitong reforma at kailangan pumili ka ng mga mabubuting mga tao na at ilagay sa iba't ibang ahensya at departamento ng gobyerno, mga professionals na hindi madaling matukso sa graft and corruption, no? Mga taong magagaling na mag-draft halimbawa ng mga batas upang maging permanente ang mga reformang isinasagawa sa ilalim ng kasalukuyang administrasyon, no? Hindi madaling gawin yon, no? Subalit, mas mabuting pag-isipan ito ngayon kaysa sabihing ang governance reform ay tungkol lamang sa mabuti yung mga hangarin mo and therefore automatically kailangan ay maisagawa itong mga ito. Hindi. Ang anumang pagbabago sa pamamahala ng isang lipunan ay kailangan isaalang-alang ang umiiral na sitwasyong pampolitika. At ang isang mabuting pinuno, lagi niyang tinitingnan kung ano ang kanyang magagawa sa limit ng kasalukuyang politika. No? Hindi niya pwedeng sabihin puro mga bobo at puro tiwali lahat ang mga politiko, ako lamang ang mabuti. No? Sapagkat anong gagawin mo kung mabuting tao ka nga, mabuting pinuno ka nga, subalit parang hindi mo naman nagagamit ang kapangyarihang ibinigay sa iyo ng taong bayan upang mapabuti ang kanilang kalagayan.
Sir, nabanggit niyo po kanina yung mabuting pamamahala. Sir, inaasahan niyo na po ba na mamaya may itanong sa inyo ang naging speech ni Pangulong Aquino kagabi tungkol po sa Disbursement Acceleration Program?
Posibleng itanong nila yan sapagkat yun ang paboritong topic ngayon, pati na rin siguro yung pagbagsak ng ratings ng Pangulo, approval at saka trust ratings. No? Pinag-isipan ko rin yan. No? Katunayan, nagsalita ako tungkol dito kagabi sa isang programang pang telebisyon. No? At aking binanggit na eksaherado ang naging reaksyon ng ibang tao sapagkat hindi naman siguro magkakaroon ng krisis pang-konstitusyonal. No? Sapagkat hindi naman sinabi ng Pangulo na susuwayin niya ang naging desisyon ng Korte Suprema. Kundi ang sabi niya, ito ay ia-appel ako sa Korte Suprema. Maaaring merong mga aspeto ng batas na hindi nila gaanong nabigyan ng karampatang pansin at harinaway kung mabasa nila ito, marirealize nila na yung batas dito medyo magulo. No? Ang interpretasyon ng Malacañang ganito, ang naging interpretasyon ng Korte Suprema ay ganito. No? Hindi naman talagang intentional na labagin ang konstitusyon. No? Wala silang ganyang hangarin. Pero mabuti rin sigurong tingnan yung listahan ng mga proyektong pinondohan sa ilalim ng Disbursement Acceleration Program or DAP. No?
Release na po siya kahapon din lamang po.
Nakita ko nga na kagabi, pagkatapos magsalita ng Pangulo, ay inilabas yung 116 na proyektong pinondohan ng DAP. Ito yung mabuting bagay. Sana nga lang nauna ito noon pa. No? Pero ito yung maganda. No? Ito yung bahagi ng tinatawag na pagpupunyagi tungo sa transparency o malinaw na pamamahala. Mabuti yan.
Nabanggit niyo, sir, yung survey, sir. Ito na po yung pinakamababa sa survey ng Pangulo. Sir, in-expect niyo ba ito o naka-apekto ba dito yung DAP na desisyon?
Ako inaasahan ko na pagkatapos ng 4 na taon ng pamamahala ng sino mang Pangulo, talagang babagsak yan. No? Halimbawa na lamang ang Presidente ng Amerika, si Barack Obama, bagamat siya ay nagkaroon ng second term, no? Ano ba ngayon ang ratings ni Obama? 41-42% approval, 53% disapproval. Kung ihahambing mo yung ratings ni Pangulong Aquino dun kay Obama, mas mataas na hindi hamak ang kanyang ratings. Pero kung ihahambing mo ang ratings ni Pinoy sa, halimbawa, Marso o nung nakarang taon,
Sir, nung Marso, ano siya? Positive 45 po.
ang difference ng Hunyo at saka Marso, itong taon na ito, na approval ratings ay I think it is 14%. 14%, no? Ang dapat itanong, saan pumunta yung 14% na nawala sa kanya? No? Tiningnan ko yung datos. Ang 8% ay pumunta, ang 6% ay pumunta dun sa disapprove. No? Yung 8% ay pumunta dun sa hindi na namin matiyak, undecided. No? Doon sa trust rating, mas maganda yon dahil 16% ang nawala sa Pangulo. Ang 11% pumunta sa hindi na namin alam. 5% ang pumunta doon sa hindi na kami nagtitiwala. So ang ibig sabihin, meron pang binibigay na puwang ang sambayanan na tingnan natin kung anong mangyayari sa susunod na 2 taon.
Maraming salamat po, sir.
Salamat din.
Aabangan po namin ang inyong pagsasalita mamaya sa panel. Mga kaibigan, ayan po si Professor Randy David, ang sociologist ng University of the Philippines, Diliman. Tinatayang aabot sa mahigit na 200 katao mula sa private sector, international partner at national government ang dumadalo sa daylight dialogue na ito na nagaganap dito sa Palasyo ng Malacañang. Ang pagbisita rito ni Dr. Jim Yong Kim ay naglalayong suportahan pang lalo ang mga reforma ng bansa para tugunan ang kahirapan at palawigin pa ang ating kahandaan sa mga kalamidad at epekto ng climate change dito sa Pilipinas. Dumating siya sa bansa at tinungo ang ilang lugar sa Leyte na lubhang sinalanta ng Bagyong Yolanda. Sa ngayon, umaabot na sa $1 bilyong ang pautang na inilaan ng World Bank sa Pilipinas. Kalahati nito po ay inilaan para sa rehabilitasyon at reconstruction efforts para sa mga lugar na sinalanta ng Bagyong Yolanda, habang $479 million naman ang inilaan para sa National Community-Driven Development Projects na pinapangasiwaan ng DSWD. 2 araw mananatili sa bansa si Dr. Jim Yong Kim. Sa pagkakataong ito po ay inaantabayanan na natin si Pangulong Aquino na dumating dito sa Rizal Hall ng Palasyo kasama ang ating panauhing pandangal na si Dr. Jim Yong Kim, ang presidente ng World Bank, na mamataan na po natin ang ilang opisyal ng gobyerno at maging ng World Bank na narito ngayon para tunghayan ang magiging speech ng 2 leader. Kanina po ay namataan. Ito pong si Yusek Manolo Quezon ay kabilang kanina sa first session ng Daylight Dialogue kung saan ay ipinaliwanag niya ang official gazette, ang website ng gobyerno, kung saan ay sinabi rin niya kanina makikita ang mahigit 100 proyekto ng gobyerno na pinaglaanan ng Disbursement Acceleration Program. Namamataan na po natin si Secretaries Dinky Soliman at Justice Secretary Leila de Lima, si BIR Commissioner Kim Henares, pati na rin si NEDA Director General Arsenio Balisaca na kanina lamang ay kasama din ng Pangulo nang tinanggap ang bisita dito sa Palasyo. Nandito na rin po kanina na mataan natin si DOTC Secretary Joseph Emilio Abaya at ito po nakikita natin ngayon si BIR Commissioner Kim Henares kasama si Commission on Audit Commissioner Grace Mendoza. Nandito rin po ang Ambassador ng Pilipinas sa Amerika na si Ambassador Krisha. Ang araw na ito po ay nakalaan para sa maghapon na dialogue ng iba't ibang guest speakers para sa Daylight Dialogue, the Good Governance Challenge. Para po sa second session mamaya ay matutunghayan po bilang mga resource persons si DILG Secretary Marojas, ang presidential spokesperson na si Secretary Edwin Lacerda, pati na rin si Commissioner John Philip Civilian ng Bureau of Customs. Na bahagi rin po ng second session si BIR Commissioner Kim Jacinto Henares at si Budget Secretary Florencio Abad. Mamaya rin pong hapon ang gaganapin ang third session at magiging resource speaker naman si Justice Secretary Leila de Lima, si Sherisa Nuesa, ang dating managing director ng Ayala Corporation. Bahagi rin po ng third session si Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales at ang chairman ng Commission on Audit na si Maria Gracia Pulidotan. Sa pagkakataong ito po ay inaantabayanan natin ang pagdating ni Pangulong Aquino kung saan ay inaasahan natin na magbibigay siya ng talumpati, pati na rin ang presidente ng World Bank na si Dr. Kim. Pagkatapos po nito ay magkakaroon ng question and answer portion na ang dalawang speakers at nalaman po natin na magkakaroon ng tig-tatlong tanong sa dalawang opisyal. Dire-diretso po ang ating live coverage hanggang sa magkaroon ng luncheon dito sa Palasyo. Samantala, isa po sa mga audience na nandito ay mula sa Mindanao at tunghayan po natin ang ating naging panayam sa kanya kanina. Kasama naman po natin ngayon si Amina Rasul. Siya po ang presidente ng Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy. Magandang araw po, ma'am.
Magandang umaga, Elena, at sa lahat ng nakikinig at nanonood sa atin, Ramadan Karim sa inyong lahat.
Ma'am, kasama po sa mga resource persons po dito ngayong araw ang World Bank President. And I know, ma'am, na malaki po ang tinutulong ng World Bank sa inyong rehiyon, sa Mindanao. Can you elaborate on this, ma'am?
Well, the World Bank has been helping development in Mindanao for a very long time. Whether you're talking about education or health, infra, the World Bank has been there. But this time specifically, the World Bank has been supporting the crafting of the Bangsamoro Development Plan. And that is being organized by the Bangsamoro Development Agency. When the transition comes from the present autonomous region for Muslim Mindanao to the new
Ladies and gentlemen,
entity.
please rise to welcome His Excellency Benigno S. Aquino III, President of the Philippines, and Dr. Jim Yong Kim, President of the World Bank Group. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Earlier today, we had the opportunity to hear panelists discuss how openness and transparency are fostered in an environment that puts a premium on insight, innovation, and integrity. Our first plenary highlighted how trust has remained the hallmark of this administration and how it forms the basis of successful relationships in government or otherwise. The panelists also talked about challenging the status quo and how solutions to concrete problems can only be brought about through cooperation between government agencies with the support of the private sector. To this end, the panelists emphasized the burgeoning role of technology in improving governance and how this poses exciting possibilities for the future. This daylight dialogue, without doubt, serves as an important venue for government officials, business leaders, and stakeholders to come together and engage one another towards realizing a shared objective of inclusive growth, growth made possible by good governance, transparency, and meaningful reform. This said, to deliver his remarks is the President of the World Bank Group. Let us all welcome Dr. Jim Yong Kim.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Cabinet and other officials, partners from the development community, members of civil society, the business community, friends, ladies, and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be back in Manila. It's been almost 30 years since my last visit, when I was working on my PhD dissertation that was focused on access to pharmaceuticals. the city and the country have changed so much over that time, especially during President Aquino's 4+ years in office. 30 years ago, it seemed as if I was the only Korean in town. Today, as you say in Tagalog, ang daming nagbago. Ang dami ng Koreano. So, for those who don't speak Tagalog like me, we were just remarking that there are many Koreans here. Today, I'm here to talk about, though, a critical issue facing the Philippines and governments around the world: the imperative of effective governance for ending poverty. President Aquino, this is an issue that you have placed at the heart of your political agenda. It's a theme that inspires the practitioners, scholars, business leaders, and citizens gathered here today. And it's a crucial topic for the organization I lead, the World Bank Group. Your government's powerful platform, Kung Walang Kurap, Walang Mahirap, or No Corruption, No Poverty, affirms the inextricable link between poor governance and persistent poverty. While this seems obvious today, the link has not always been clearly acknowledged in development work. It was less than 20 years ago that then World Bank President James Wolfensohn helped ignite a global movement for transparency in governance when he spoke out against the cancer of corruption that cheats poor people of their share of the benefits of economic growth. Since President Wolfensohn's wake-up call, many countries have made progress in strengthening governance and curbing corruption. The Philippines has achieved notable gains to which many of you in this hall have contributed. But you also know that good governance is not easy. No country is immune from governance abuses, no matter how great that nation's wealth or deep its democratic traditions. Recent scandals in the United States, Italy, France, and other high-income democracies have brought us stern reminders of this fact. That's why it's so important that we set clear goals for governance, collect evidence as we experiment, and implement reforms, share experiences with one another. We have to refine and improve our work continually as economies, technology, and public expectations evolve. And this is why I'm so glad to be with you here this morning, because this conference is a space for exactly that kind of exchange. My remarks will focus on 3 major themes. First, I'll make the case that good governance is critical for development and ending poverty. Second, I'll present some practices that represent the cutting edge of governance reform today. And third, I'll tell you how the World Bank is changing so that we can help our clients be even more effective in building good governance. Like the Philippines, the World Bank Group explicitly recognizes that governance is critical for fighting poverty. Good governance means delivering public services effectively and efficiently. It means protecting citizens from violence and ensuring the rule of law. It means choosing wise policies and investments, maintaining public assets, and ensuring that civil servants are skilled, motivated, and have the tools to work effectively. It means directly confronting corruption so that citizens have faith in their leaders and systems. Today, good governance also requires fostering a transparent regulatory environment that will allow the private sector to create good jobs. In sum, good governance makes it possible for us to execute and deliver around our most cherished social goals, those that define how we want to live together as nations and as a global community. President Aquino, your 2010 Philippine Development Plan set forth 2 such goals: to attain inclusive growth, which you defined as the reduction of poverty, and to create jobs. In 2013, the World Bank Group also set 2 goals: to end extreme poverty worldwide by 2030, and to boost shared prosperity for the poorest 40% of the population in developing nations. The convergence between the Philippines' goals and those set out by the World Bank's Board of Governors is striking and no accident. Countries like the Philippines and institutions like the World Bank are allies in the great struggle of our generation, a global fight to end poverty and build inclusive prosperity while safeguarding the earth for those who will come after us. At its heart, this is a fight for wiser, more capable governance. It's now well established within the academic literature on institutions and growth that there's a strong positive correlation between the principles of good governance and a country's GDP per capita. As you, President Aquino, have so eloquently noted, good governance is good economics. The precise causal relationships are less well understood, but some recent studies have begun to confirm what many of us have long suspected, that effective institutions, or their absence, have an important impact on economic growth. There's plenty of evidence that corruption can deter private investment, and studies at the sectoral level have documented the perverse effect that corruption and weak administration can exert on education and health outcomes, or on the quality and selection of infrastructure projects. Some recent studies from the United States underscore that high levels of corruption are associated with increased inequality as well. We still have a lot to learn about the role of institutions in fostering development and reducing poverty. Knowledge about which reforms are most likely to succeed under specific circumstances remains fragmented, and the underlying conceptual and methodological challenges are significant. The World Bank Group is committed to supporting rigorous empirical efforts to address these critical questions. We also believe that the post-2015 development agenda should encourage countries to tackle governance challenges head-on, measure results, and share their data to build a stronger global knowledge base from which all will benefit. The cutting edge of governance reform is, in many ways, being rolled out right here in the Philippines. Let's take a moment to look broadly, but let me repeat, so many of the things that we are learning here in the Philippines will be important to share with countries all over the world. And some other countries are also on, we would call, the cutting edge of governance reform. Broadly, a transformational age of governance progress is dawning for countries with the courage to act. Around the world, the spread of information technology is converging with grassroots movements for transparency, accountability, and citizen empowerment. Under your leadership, President Aquino, the Philippines is absolutely in the forefront of this transformation. You've doubled government budgets for social services and made performance-informed budgeting the norm. Citizens increasingly see your conditional cash transfer, program, Pantawid Pamilya, as an instrument to realize their rights to education and healthcare. Your administration has also streamlined business regulations, bringing down the cost of doing business and reducing opportunities for corruption. Your open data initiative has reinforced accountability at all levels of government. For instance, the Philippines is now using electronic procurement technology to encourage citizens to be observers in all stages of the bidding process, and just recently started the use of geotagging. Similar tools are now being used to monitor assistance for people affected by Typhoon Yolanda. Your commitment to transparency is a beacon for the nations of East Asia and beyond. Other countries are also moving forward with innovative reforms, and here are just a few examples. In Colombia and other Latin American states, Rapid Assessment and Action Plans, or RAPs, are being used to improve public services at the subnational level. The RAP methodology diagnoses bureaucratic bottlenecks and provides public sector managers with a short and medium-term action plan for unblocking constraints to effective service delivery. In Pakistan, government departments in the Punjab are using smartphones to collect real-time data, including photos and geotags on the activities of government field staff, helping to reduce absenteeism and lax performance. These examples highlight characteristics we see emerging in many successful governance initiatives around the world. I'll point out 4 such traits of these programs. First is the mobilization of teams that consist of experts in multiple disciplines to tackle the most complex problems. Second is the opening of space for citizen participation in administrative decision-making and the delivery of public services. Third is the harnessing of information technology, sometimes including inexpensive consumer devices in innovative ways. And finally is the fostering of practitioner-led networks supported by global institutions. For the moment, these ideas are in their infancy and have not yet been brought to scale. But I hope they may help guide your discussions in the course of this conference. At the World Bank Group, we've been privileged to contribute to several of the country initiatives I've just described. And today, we're reconfiguring our governance practice to serve countries better. Historically, the bank's governance work began in the early 1990s by focusing on core state functions such as public finance and civil service management. With the rise of the anti-corruption movement in the mid-1990s, we expanded to support new accountability institutions, the rule of law, and legal and judicial reform. We began working on demand-side governance issues as we deepened our engagement with civil society. This evolution continues today, spurred by events like the Arab Spring that again have shown what happens when people's demands for accountability and participation go unheard. We've also stepped up our efforts to address corruption in programs we support by encouraging corruption reporting in our projects, investigating and sanctioning entities that resort to fraud and corruption, and working with sanctioned firms to improve their integrity compliance standards. In the near future, important drivers for change are likely to be the use of mobile technologies for monitoring service delivery, cloud computing and the use of big data, improved domestic revenue mobilization, and greater transparency around the extractive industries. To align ourselves with the demands of our clients and the rapidly evolving technological breakthroughs, the bank's approach has evolved. The days of static best practice recipes are long gone. Increasingly, we're tapping into our interdisciplinary expertise and our capacity to nurture collaborative partnerships within and across regions. We support a growing number of peer-to-peer learning networks, such as the Public Expenditure Management Network for Asia and the Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency. We continue to generate robust empirical data, and we're working to capture lessons from the experience of our frontline implementers. Previously undocumented, tacit knowledge is now being collected and we hope widely shared. These approaches have helped many of our clients make impressive gains in governance, but we can do more. Over the past 6 months, the bank's internal structural reform has created the conditions for a qualitative leap in our capacity to support countries, especially in terms of the governance process. Previously, our knowledge was not moving fast enough or reaching the right people at the right time. For example, our staff in East Asia didn't talk enough to their counterparts in South Asia. Our new organizational structure in 14 global practices is breaking down old geographical and disciplinary silos. The result will be greater fluidity in knowledge sharing and collaboration. Our governance global practice exemplifies the model. It will be the largest of the new global practices with around 800 staff. It will pull together experts from backgrounds including public sector reform, financial management, legal reform, social accountability, information management, tax and revenue mobilization, and regulatory policy, among others. Its structure will allow us to rapidly mobilize the bank's global expertise across many disciplines. To put it simply, President Aquino, the bank's governance global practice is here to learn from your achievements and help you accomplish even more. We will work with you to identify and implement practical solutions to your toughest governance challenges. And we'll support the measurement and global dissemination of your results to speed progress in other countries. Before concluding, I'd like to turn my remarks briefly to the Filipino community within the World Bank family. We're privileged to employ nearly 400 Filipinos and Filipinas, who constitute the 6th largest nationality represented at the World Bank Group. Recently, all of us lost a dear friend, colleague, and lifelong crusader for the cause of good governance, Jose Edgardo Campos, or Ed, as he was known by his many friends. Ed was a pillar in the governance and public sector community within the bank. He held a number of high-profile positions, most recently as manager for the World Bank Institute's leadership program. Always striving to make a difference, Ed took several years away from his bank career to return and work for the government of the Philippines, where he played an instrumental role in helping to secure passage of the 2003 Government Procurement Reform Act. In his memory, I'm pleased to announce that the new Governance Global Practice will create the Jose Edgardo Campos Award. This award will honor bank staff who follow in Ed's footsteps by returning to their countries of origin to advance the cause of governance reform. Finally, I want to come back to the theme of partnership and to a related idea that may seem more old-fashioned, that of service. The partnership between the Philippines and the World Bank Group is strong. It is founded on common goals and values. Above all, on our commitment to a model of shared prosperity powered by ordinary people's capacity for entrepreneurship, creativity, and resilience. I saw the impact of these qualities yesterday when I visited the Leyte region with Secretary Dinky. 8 months ago, the region bore the assault of Typhoon Yolanda. Today, there's still much to be done in the reconstruction efforts, but I believe recovery is gaining the upper hand on the storm's destruction. The physical scars remain visible, and nothing can replace the storm's cost in human lives. But when I met people in Leyte, I encountered not bitterness, but resilience, a spirit of solidarity, and a determination to look forward rather than back. Their attitude reinforced my conviction that when ordinary people unite, we can overcome any obstacle. The only limits to our achievement are the limits of our solidarity, the limits of our willingness to invest ourselves without reserve in action toward a common goal. Let's honor the Leyte survivors by emulating their courage in our own work. Let's build a world where people's vulnerability to disasters is no longer determined primarily by their income level. Let's build institutions that respond to the slow emergency of poverty with the same intensity as the sudden shock of a typhoon. Let's redefine the limits of the possible together. In the beginning of the speech, I spoke of the many Koreans who now are here in the Philippines. Well, I just want to say, President Aquino, that this Korean believes in you, believes in this country, it's a very promising future. Once again, in my newfound Tagalog, mula sa isang kapuso at isang kapamilya. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Kim. Let us now welcome the Honorable Florencio Abad, the Secretary of Budget and Management, to introduce our keynote speaker and guest of honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Republic of the Philippines, Benigno Simeon Aquino III.
Through social services, health, and education, to leveling the playing field and fostering an attractive atmosphere for investments and the jobs that they create. The famed belief of former President Ramon Magsaysay encapsulates this perfectly. that those who have less in life should have more in law. At the same time, I also believe in another part of President Magsaysay's credo, which states that a healthy impatience should be among the characteristics a president must have. I would put it this way: it is not enough that we act. The duty of government is to act and to do what is right, to do what benefits the vast majority of people at the soonest possible time. You can just ask any of my cabinet secretaries about my own healthy impatience, which some of them may describe less kindly, coupled with a memory that is greater than an elephant's. All jokes aside, this impatience has led to my preoccupation with constantly innovating and improving the way we serve the Filipino people. We can never be satisfied with the status quo. It is with this belief that we have always evaluated ourselves and revisited programs and policies to ensure the utmost efficiency in rendering service to the Filipino people. This is the only way that the Philippines can continue on its upward trajectory and reap the benefits of the reforms that Dr. Kim cited earlier. This is the fastest way we can move towards the vision we share with the World Bank, a future of true inclusivity and equitable prosperity. The first status quo we had to disrupt was that of government trapped in a vicious cycle of inefficiency and corruption, where the budget was full of leaks, allowing unscrupulous officials to steal money from the Filipino people. After all, we share the World Bank's belief that the key to winning the war against poverty is nothing less than sustained and inclusive economic growth, and that no country has ever won the war against poverty without addressing corruption and weakness of economic institutions. As such, in 2011, we took on the task of shoring up the budget, of re-evaluating the systems and processes we had inherited in order to plug the leaks. After all, the Philippines is a country with limited resources, and we needed to ensure that all our resources were being maximized to serve the people. We embarked on a review of existing programs in order to weed out those that were not serving the country and those that were merely being used by the corrupt to line their pockets. Each and every item in the national budget came under scrutiny. For each project, we asked one question: how does this benefit the Filipino people? Doing this, however, led to reduced government spending. This, combined with the economic downturn the world was facing, led to a slowdown in economic growth. We were fully aware of the dangers of doing nothing. I am told that for every peso we spend on infrastructure, another peso of output is generated in other sectors. Imagine the billions of pesos in infrastructure that went unspent. The impact on the economy would be magnified, and that is only for the short term. We are not even considering other factors, such as the time and the fuel costs saved through improved road systems, the jobs that would be lost also in the long term, among other things. The cost of underutilizing existing resources is measured not just in pesos or percentage points. It is measured, I think more importantly, in the amount of empty stomachs, the number of jobless people, and the loss of opportunities for those in the margins. It deprives the people of benefits now and diminishes future benefits for the entire country. We had to act. We knew that if we were to bring about inclusive growth sooner rather than later, we needed to be proactive and pump prime the economy. We chose to do this through a management tool now known as the Disbursement Acceleration Program, or DAP. In July of 2011, right before my State of the Nation address, I received a progress report from each department of the executive branch. Through these reports, we discovered that, for one reason or another, there were programs and projects that were moving very slowly, if at all, while others were able to accomplish their goals much more quickly. Some agencies were able to use their budgets effectively, while other agencies were not, whether because of legitimate reasons or because we had suspended their projects to investigate leaks or anomalies. Of course, the question arose: what would happen to the funds that were not being used? What would happen to what some would term savings? Before I go on, perhaps I can clarify. And I said this yesterday, but in any household, savings are always good. They can be kept for a rainy day or for an emergency. In government, however, savings are almost always bad. They are the equivalent of programs and projects left unfulfilled, of foregone benefits for the Filipino people. Given this, we had the decision to make. Should government be content to leave these funds idle? Or should we find a way to put them to good use, to put them in service of the Filipino people? It became evident that the latter opinion or option was the only option we could consider if we wanted to stay true to our mandate. With that, I asked my cabinet what projects they would be able to implement and what they could not. We agreed that if agencies could not maximize the use of their budgets in the mid-year review, then we would allocate them to programs that would bring benefits to our people in the soonest possible time. This is precisely what we did under the Disbursement Acceleration Program. Two of the projects that were funded under DAP I spoke of yesterday: the construction of classrooms and the electrification of an additional 2,110 sitios or small communities across the archipelago over the earlier target of 4,053 sitios. Allow me to speak to you about a few more of them. Over 50% of the 144 billion released under the Disbursement Acceleration Program went to three critical agencies. First, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or the Central Bank. Second, our Department of Public Works and Highways. And lastly, the National Housing Authority. The new Central Bank Act of 1993 mandated a 50 billion peso recapitalization for the Central Bank of the Philippines. Under the watch of then-President Ramos, an initial capitalization of 10 billion pesos was provided, but a 40 billion peso deficit remained unfulfilled until my administration came into office. We filled that deficit. 10 billion pesos under the General Appropriations Act and the remaining 30 billion pesos under the Disbursement Acceleration Program. This has empowered our central bank to perform its functions fully for the benefit of our economy. Of course, under the able stewardship of Governor Tetanco, we had very high confidence that this would all be achieved. Over 33 billion went to the Department of Public Works and Highways. It was used in the construction and rehabilitation of roads, bridges, flood control projects, and other critical infrastructure across the country. This helped boost the growth and effectiveness of industry. It made it easier for tourists to reach favored destinations. It helped make the Philippines a more attractive destination to investors. This we did under DAP. Through programs implemented by the National Housing Authority, 700 homes in safe areas were provided for the former residents of North Triangle, Quezon City. 21,175 housing units were completed, with 3,742 more units still under construction for families living in danger zones in the National Capital Region. In Iloilo, families living along the Iloilo River benefited from 1,000 housing units, and a total of 2,498 housing units were also built for the uniformed personnel of the Bureau of Fire Protection and the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology. Under DAP, 11 billion pesos went to giving these Filipinos safe homes. And there were many more projects. We renovated hospitals and health centers and upgraded their equipment. We hired nurses and midwives and deployed them to areas where they were most needed. We expanded the coverage of our flagship conditional cash transfer program. We bolstered livelihood projects, preserved key tourism and heritage sites, and strengthened our weather forecasting abilities. We also improved the facilities of state universities and colleges and empowered our youth to join the workforce through the Training for Work Scholarship Program. Under that, we were also able to completely settle a debt that past administrations had incurred. We released 3.46 billion pesos to pay the balance of unpaid GSIS or government pension premium payments. These unpaid premiums had kept almost 800,000 teaching and non-teaching personnel in the Department of Education from receiving their just benefits. Now, these personnel can receive their pensions and access the full benefits due them, including loans for their children's education. Only a minimal portion of DAP releases have any issue. And rest assured, the Commission on Audit will ensure that if there was any abuse or misuse of this fund, then those responsible will be held to account. The full details of the programs that were implemented under DAP were released last night and can be accessed to the official Gazette website. which is www.gov.ph, or can be found in this particular address. The most compelling statement that has risen above the din and clamor surrounding DAP has been this undisputed truth. DAP was good. Neither the Supreme Court nor our most vociferous critics have made statements to the contrary. In a report entitled Philippines Quarterly Update from Stability to Prosperity for All, released in March 2012, the World Bank itself stated outright that DAP contributed to economic growth. And it did so in the best way possible, funneling billions of pesos in savings back into the economy through programs that would directly and immediately redound to the benefit of the Filipino people. On top of this, it also had a positive signaling effect to the private sector. In 2011, after the slowdown, growth was only at 3.7%. After investors and businessmen saw how quickly and efficiently government moved to address this, they gained confidence to invest in the country, and the numbers do speak for themselves. In 2012, growth was at 6.8%. I have to ask, can the same effects be attributed to DAP's previous incarnations? My predecessors all had their versions of DAP, called the Reserve Control Account and, alternatively, overall savings, which were used in part to respond to the Asian financial crisis and the fiscal crisis. I should add, these former presidents also exercised the authority to transfer appropriations or savings to other branches of government and even to constitutional commissions. Perhaps we are being questioned today simply because we have been truly transparent about it. In the interest of transparency, allow me to share why DAP is perfectly legal. Let us look at the Administrative Code of 1987, specifically Book 6, Chapter 5, Section 38 of the Administrative Code, which states, and I quote, "Except as otherwise provided in the General Appropriations Act, and whenever in his judgment the public interest so requires, the President, upon notice to the head of office concerned, is authorized to suspend or otherwise stop further expenditure of funds allotted for any agency or any other expenditure authorized in the General Appropriations Act, except for personal services, appropriations used for permanent officials and employees," close quote. We did not base the legality of DAP on this provision alone. Again, same book, Chapter 5 again, Section 39 of the Administrative Code states, and again I quote, "Except as otherwise provided in the General Appropriations Act, any savings in the regular appropriations authorized in the General Appropriations Act for programs and projects of any department, office, or agency may, with the approval of the President, be used to cover a deficit in any other item of the regular appropriations," close quote. Furthermore, Book 6 again, Chapter 5, Section 49 of the same Administrative Code states in part, and I quote, "Savings in the appropriations provided in the General Appropriations Act may be used for the settlement of the following obligations incurred during a current fiscal year or previous fiscal years, as may be approved by the Secretary in accordance with rules and procedures as may be approved by the President." Subsection 9 states, "Priority activities that will promote the economic well-being of the nation, including food production, agrarian reform, energy development, disaster relief, and rehabilitation." Subsection 10, "Repair, improvement, and renovation of government buildings and infrastructure and other capital assets damaged by natural calamities," close quote. At first, we were bewildered by the decision of the Supreme Court. They said that DAP was a policy well within our rights to implement, and more importantly, that it did good. What is the logic of saying that DAP redounded to a lot of good, but in the same breath saying that as a method it was bad? From their point of view, we can understand why the Supreme Court declared certain portions of DAP unconstitutional. After all, they did not so much as look at the Administrative Code of 1987, which I should add is still constitutional in its entirety. The Supreme Court decision is deeply unsettling, not only because our honorable justices failed to take into consideration all our legal basis for DAP, but also, and more importantly, because the ruling will have a chilling effect on our economy and consequently on millions of Filipinos. For instance, following the Supreme Court ruling, ARM Governor Mujib Hataman made the difficult decision to suspend the implementation of all projects implemented under DAP. These projects include health centers, agricultural facilities, and other social services that would have redounded to the benefit of the region, which has, as you all know, battled inequality and poverty for the longest time. Governor Hataman was exercising prudence, which is only right. Excuse me. At the same time, the situation in ARM reflects the potentially devastating effect that the Supreme Court decision will have across the Philippines. Out of prudence, I've ordered the suspension of programs and projects funded under DAP. With their decision, it seems as if no government official can be confident in bidding out programs and projects when the threat of a lawsuit hangs over their heads. Thus, the infrastructure projects, essential social services, and other programs funded under DAP had to be suspended. Eventually, we may be able to find the funds for these projects. It would entail going to Congress and requesting for supplemental budgets, an already lengthy process that may be even extended by obstructionists and oppositionists. In the short term, the decision will have the effect of once again slowing down government spending. In the long term, it removes our flexibility to act effectively in response to changing market conditions and seize or even create opportunities in doing so. It condemns us to a spiral of inefficiency, uncertainty, and lack of confidence. This is indeed a shame, especially when we have come so far. Imagine, from 1990 to 1999, our average GDP growth was 2.8%. From 2000 to 2009, it was at 4.5%. Under our watch, from 2010 to 2013, it shot up to 6.3%. They say that for a country to lift itself out of poverty, it is necessary to have a growth rate consistent at 7% or more. We are getting there. Unfortunately, the effects of the Supreme Court decision run the risk of putting our country's development in a state of paralysis, or worse, reversing the massive progress we have already made. This is not acceptable. Ensuring that essential services reach our countrymen is not just part of the mandate of the executive branch. It is part of the mandate of every branch of government. I find it difficult to accept their decision when I know that we are right. And more importantly, that doing nothing means depriving so many Filipinos of opportunities to grow and prosper. I find it difficult to accept the decision of the Supreme Court when it goes against the benefit of our countrymen. In fact, I believe that any reasonable person confronted with the same dilemma would come up with the same solution, or even a better refinement of what we did. I chose to run for the presidency, to accept the challenge to do so, to do my part in moving the country further along the path to progress. And I cannot support any ruling that severely limits government's capacity to serve its people in the quickest manner possible. I am certain that this audience, composed of development experts and leaders of industry, can agree with me. Let me make it clear. I bear no grudge or ill will against the Supreme Court. That is not why we have consistently expressed our opposition to the ruling, or why we have decided to file a motion for reconsideration. Continue to reap success after success, that the marginalized will be able to take stock of their lives and leave the margins once and for all, that businesses will thrive, and that the Philippines will finally realize its vision of lasting and inclusive growth. After all, the be-all and end-all of government is to uplift our countrymen. And I cannot, in good conscience, sit idly by when government's ability to empower them is jeopardized. I thank you and good day.
Thank you, Mr. President. The President and Dr. Kim have kindly agreed to take questions from representatives from the business sector. May I call on Mr. Gregorio Navarro, President of the Management Association of the Philippines. He will be asking the first set of questions.
Good morning, Mr. President, Dr. Kim, secretaries. I think, well, most of your speech dwelt with the issues of the day, and I would like to follow that up with a question on the PDAF and the DAP controversies. The worry, I think, of the business community and civil society is that it will lead, as you mentioned, to a shutdown or paralysis in government. The bureaucracy, the chilling effect on the bureaucracy, they might be afraid now to make decisions or implement projects. The distraction at the legislative branch of government. We have huge pending bills, no? The Bangsamoro Basic Law, the fiscal incentives rationalization, the customs modernization, and of course, we understand that the executive is also stymied if you don't have something to use to incentivize projects. And the legislators, I understand, you sometimes need to give them incentives even to make sure there's a quorum in Congress. Anyway, much have been asked of you, and much has been delivered by the government. I think it's about time that you ask the Filipino people and civil society, your bosses, you call them, to assist in these efforts, to make sure that the reforms continue and that we're able to sustain the economic gains. So what exactly do you want from us to help you?
What is doable, and then again, no, incentivize the legislature amongst other things. So we are not that far off from elections, no? And this is, I think, the time when all politicians are very attuned to what their bosses want. So the bosses have to make that message very clear, perhaps in the form of letters, emails, text messages to your representatives, reminding them that this is what we want, this is our priorities, and please execute them as soon as possible. That's the very first thing. We'll come up with perhaps a manifestation of the support that if I still have the support of our people, and concrete examples of this. Perhaps wearing our yellow ribbon, no, amongst other things, just to demonstrate exactly in a quick manner where the sentiments of our people lie. But we will be posting a more detailed list of requests to our bosses in the coming days.
Mr. President, to Dr. Kim, I think you've given us a lot of examples of best practices that you are implementing in the World Bank. We understand there are challenges also in your reform of the bureaucracy, and of course, the parallelism with your eradication of extreme poverty and 40% of the bottom poor. I think they're good examples. They are best practices. Perhaps we could also learn from the mistakes that you have seen and you have made at the World Bank. And the second part of the question is on the powers of government between the local government and the national government. We have seen, I think, we believe in the business community that giving a lot of power to the local government has not exactly worked. They have been able to put roadblocks. They have been able to impound some of the national government policies to their own advantage. Their parochial interest becomes more important than the national interest. So is there a balance between the powers that you would give the national government and the local government to make sure that reforms and development do happen? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, I have no power to give any power to any local or national government. But I would say that you know the democratic systems are tough. You know, and this is a sprawling, new, growing, and important democracy in the region. And you know, the notion of giving the right incentives to do the right thing and move forward is exactly what we're trying to do inside the World Bank Group, and also to try to make clear to governments in terms of their choices. So let me first of all step back and say, you know, has the World Bank made mistakes? Well, I have to tell you, you know, 20 years ago, I was actually on the streets protesting against the World Bank as part of a movement called 50 Years is Enough, when we were saying that on its 50th anniversary, the World Bank and the IMF should close its doors. Now, we lost that argument, and I'm very glad we lost that argument. But part of it was that what we were arguing is that the World Bank was overly focused on GDP growth and not focused enough on investment in people. I mean, I was a medical doctor working, in some of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere at that time. And what we saw was that some of the recommendations, maybe not even that the World Bank directly made, but that the spirit was focus on GDP growth and everything else will fall into place. And we saw that they were actually not falling into place. And so inside the World Bank Group, the great news is that now we've changed a lot. There's so much overwhelming evidence that suggests that investing in the health and education of your people is not just an expenditure. It's not just an expenditure for social solidarity. It's actually a critical part of your economic growth strategy. We know that now very clearly. A recent study suggested that fully 24% of economic growth in developing countries from 2000 to 2011 was related directly to improved health. And we also know that the performance on PISA scores, the OECD PISA scores, is also directly related to economic growth. We won that argument inside the World Bank Group, but the position we have to take over and over and over again is that when you're in the business of fighting poverty, when you're in the business of trying to boost the prosperity of the poorest, you're going to make mistakes. And I think for me, the most important thing is that when we make mistakes, that we're ready to admit them, say, we're sorry, we'll try to get better, and we'll move forward. That's the new spirit that we're trying to build inside the World Bank Group. The national-local balance, again, my job is not to comment on local politics here, but what I have seen is that the most effective countries in managing in managing economic growth are ones that have a vision that does come from the top, a clear vision about the kind of growth that you're looking for. And let me tell you how important it is that this country is looking for inclusive growth and is explicit about it. What we now have to do is to come back to the leadership and say, okay, if you're building roads, here is a more inclusive way to think about road building. Here is a more inclusive way to think about energy production. Here is a more inclusive way to think about health education. That's our job. And when you can do that and you have a vision from the national level, then the translation to the local level, I would hope, can be much stronger, and mostly because civil society organizations and the people are going to embrace that vision coming from the president, and then will demand that their local officials follow that vision. We hope to be able to both learn from the Philippines and also provide these examples of how you can do these important things in a more inclusive way.
Our second set of questions will be coming from Mr. Edmundo Soriano, President of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. There's been much talk about the country's improving its infrastructure facilities so that we can maintain and sustain the current economic growth that we're experiencing at the moment under the Aquino administration. Now, but for the first quarter of this year, we've seen statistics indicate that government has been underspending, roughly about 15% vis-a-vis its program budget. Now, my question is, how do you plan to accelerate infrastructure spending by the government in light of the fact that you need to follow the bidding process, the procurement process within the guidelines of the Philippine government? Now, I also believe that the government is targeting to have infrastructure spending to be about 5% of GDP. Currently, it's about only 2%.
It's about 3.5% currently already of GDP. There have been a lot of steps that have been undertaken to minimize, how should I put it, going through the bureaucratic maze. For instance, which are yung mga activities, pre-procurement activities and pre-construction. Can I ask Secretary Abad to give one detail?
Well, one of the things that we're doing to accelerate the execution of projects is to advance the procurement process. For example, in the 2015 budget, we have required all agencies to begin the procurement process this August for next year. And they should be finished short of award by the end of the year, so that when the new budget takes effect, because we are now under a regime of what is called the budget as the release document. They don't have to go to the department to ask for release of allotments, but automatically the allotments take effect so that the awards and the notices to proceed begin on the first week of January. That's how it's going to be.
Just to baka some people might misconstrue that again. We are not actually almost procuring something without the authority of Congress. No, that is not the point. But all of the, necessary steps, the pre-qualification, the design, the invitation, well, the preparation of the invitation to bid, all of those steps that normally happen after you get the authority to spend, which takes between 4 to 6 months. No? We're trying to cut that down so that they are ready to implement it by the time Congress approves a request to spend X amounts of money. I guess that is the point that Secretary Abad is trying to raise. And of course, it goes without saying that I'm very friendly with my cabinet. I keep on talking to them and asking precisely where they are in terms of the expenditure program that they committed to.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Secretary Abad. For Mr. Kim, the last couple of years has seen the transformation of the Philippine economy from being a perennial laggard in Asia to one that is currently displaying a very robust economic story in the region. What other good governance reforms or economic reforms do you think the Philippine government should institute for us to be able to keep and maintain this current growth momentum in the economy? Please keep in mind that there's going to be national elections within the next 2 years, or in less than 2 years.
Well, you know, when I was born in Korea in 1959, during the 60s and 70s, many development economists compared the Philippines and South Korea. And just about everyone thought that the one country that really had a chance to quickly become a high-income country was the Philippines. And conversely, they said that South Korea was a basket case, that there's no chance that South Korea would develop. It was agrarian, the literacy level was below 20%, the number of people who went to college. And so that didn't happen. But one of the reasons for me coming here is to really ask the question, so are all those things that development economists saw in the 60s and 70s still here? And can the Philippines be the next Asian miracle? Well, coming here, I think there's no question that that is the case. And if you look at the situation right now, you know, the macroeconomic fundamentals are very good, very strong management over the last 4 years. We see a young, very vibrant workforce, and the young people are now known for the strong work ethic, the ability to speak English, a very internationalized and internationalizable workforce. I see a lot of very positive things here, but are there still things left to do? Yes, of course there are. 90% of all jobs in developing countries are created by the private sector. And can the government do more working with the private sector to make this, to enhance the vibrancy of the private sector growth and job creation? Yes, I think there always are things that you can do to improve the business environment. Are there things that can be done in terms of focusing, for example, on small and medium enterprises so that better jobs can be created? Yes. So I still think there are lots of things that the government can focus on. I think that more competition for the private sector. I mean, one of the things that happened in South Korea, many people feel that the key to South Korean development was industrial policy. Scholars now are saying that one of the really important aspects of the Korean development process was that the rise of the conglomerates, the chaebols, happened in a way that competition among them was extremely intense. And having that competition among those large groups inside Korea prepared them to compete in the outside world. So, some of the things that we talk about in our Doing Business report are all things that can be improved here. But again, among the most important things you can do is tackle corruption. And that's, as I said, one of the things that the government is doing, frankly, better than just about any other government in the world. And so if it continues down that path, if it continues making the reforms that it's already committed to, if it continues to manage monetary policy and maintain the strong macroeconomic fundamentals, I see very strong growth. We downgraded the overall global growth forecast from 3.2% to 2.8%, but we did not downgrade our forecast for the Philippine economy. We think it's going to hold steady at around 6.4% with a lot of upside going into the future. So I just will say again, maintain these reforms, continue on the path that you're going on, and I think the future is very bright for the Philippines.
Our last set of questions will come from one of our panelists earlier, Mr. Ramon Del Rosario Jr., Chairman of the Makati Business Club.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I said this earlier, but I'd like to say it directly to you. I believe you deserve congratulations for your speech last night and for your speech today.
Thank you.
I think your message that your administration did the things that it did because it serves the Filipino people is a message that resonates with us. And I think your determination to pursue that path is also a message that resonates with us. One of the concerns of the business community is that all of these concerns about DAP and PDAF might cause the administration to become gun-shy or to become overly cautious. My wish, and I'm sure this wish is shared by many of us in the business community, that on the contrary, the best response, I think, is to continue the very strong momentum that this administration has achieved over the last 4 years. Momentum not only in reforms, but of course also in terms of the growth path of our economy. I think the best response to the problems that are being encountered is to continue to show the conviction that you are on the right path and to continue with as much vigor as you've demonstrated so far. Now, along the lines of continuing this momentum, there are certain things that I'd like to tell you a little bit more about. As you know, Mr. President, 3 years ago we launched what we call the Integrity Initiative, and you were kind enough to attend 2 of our summits. One of the items in the Integrity Initiative that we are very proud of is that we have signed up some 3,000 CEOs from the business community. But part of the process is also engaging the government to participate with us. And we have gained the support of many departments of government. But one of the things that is needed to push this further is to create a framework so that more government departments and offices can participate actively. And we have for some time now asked for an executive order that will create a framework that will allow departments to encourage or even require government departments, particularly for those entities that are seeking incentives from government or seeking ways by which their business transactions can be facilitated, for them to be asked or strongly urged to participate in the Integrity Initiative. And I believe Secretary Purisima and Secretary Abad are familiar with these efforts that we are making. And really, it is more an appeal rather than a question that I hope that appeal will be viewed favorably. The second, Mr. President, is a long-standing issue that I brought to your attention early in your administration, and this is the Freedom of Information Bill. The context here is this. We think that this administration has done much more in terms of transparency than all the other administrations that we have seen. And I think those gains really need to be preserved and pursued into the future. I think one way by which these reforms can be best preserved is, of course, to institutionalize them. We realize that there are many areas where confidentiality is required, that there are national security concerns, that there are concerns related to executive privilege, and concerns of that nature. But I guess realizing all of these concerns, there is still the feeling among the advocates that it really is necessary to institutionalize the gains in terms of transparency that have been already achieved. So my question simply, Mr. President, is can we have your assurance that in the course of your term, before the end of your term, that the Freedom of Information Bill will in fact be passed? Thank you.
I join you in somebody was frustrated in the search for information previously, especially when I was in the legislature. There is a need for that. And we have suggested to Congress certain amendments to the proposed measures that will make it really a doable activity for government. I regret I cannot certify it as urgent because the Constitution requires an emergency. But the assurance, I think, should be given at this point in time that it will be passed before the end of my term. Now, with regards to the executive order requesting for the integrity initiative, I understand it will be subsumed by this proposed to you, and I just want to make sure that I give you the right title. There is an executive order on a presidential interagency committee on the UN Convention Against Corruption. So this integrity portion, there will be a portion on the integrity initiative embodied in that proposed EO. And I'm just awaiting its arrival on my desk.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Right
you very,
away.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. For Dr. Kim, along the same lines, the business community is really quite eager to participate quite actively in the improvement of governance. And as I said earlier, we have launched this thing we call the Integrity Initiative, which has gained widespread support both from government and from the private sector. The question is really very simple. We've, I think, begun discussions with your people here in the Philippines about the possibility of partnering with the World Bank in terms of pursuing not only the goals but also the processes involved in giving more substance to the Integrity Initiative. And really my hope is that you at your level will also support the partnership that we envision and give as much support as possible to the Integrity Initiative. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Kim.
you. Thank you. Well, we certainly are committed to it. As you know, we have since 1955 had a private sector portion of the World Bank Group, and it makes us a little bit unique in the sense that you know, we are able to work across the public and the private sector in an integrated way, and it's one of the big changes that we've brought to the World Bank Group, and just simply insisting that our public and private sector portions of the bank work closely together. Now, you know, one of the difficult parts of working with the World Bank Group is that we have a very, very well-developed integrity function. We have the inspection panel on the public side, and we have the Ombudsman's office on the private sector side. And so we have learned a lot about how to follow and investigate corruption. And so we're very happy to share those lessons here. And I think that we're seeing a fundamental sea change in the way people think about safeguards and anti-corruption activities. Because what happens is that at first, you know, we were accused of just being too slow. All these environmental safeguards, you know, safeguards for indigenous people, the anti-corruption, it's just too slow. But what we're finding is that organizations that move too quickly are getting into trouble. And we're finding that investors, especially from the private sector, you know, sovereign wealth funds and the like, are extremely gun-shy about the reputational damage that comes if you move too quickly without these kinds of safeguards in place. So we're now partnering with lots of different organizations to embed these kinds of practices and embed these kinds of systems that can detect corruption. And we're extremely happy to work with the private sector here in the Philippines to do just that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Dr. Kim. Thank you to the three gentlemen who asked questions. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our keynote event for this morning. We would like to ask the World Bank delegation to please join the President and Dr. Kim on stage for a photo opportunity. We would like to call Mr. Axel van Trotzenberg, Mr. Sergio Pimenta, Mr. Motoo Konishi, Mr. Jesse Ang, and Mr. John Donnelly of the World Bank Group. Thank you, Mr. President.
Na
Thank
tunghayan
you,
niyo po
Dr.
mga
Kim, and thank you
kaibigan
to the
ang isa sa highlight ng Daylight Dialogue na nagaganap ngayon sa Palasyo ng Malacañang, ang speeches ni Pangulong Aquino at ni Dr. Jim Yong Kim, ang presidente ng World Bank Group. Kanina po sa speech ni Dr. Kim ay nagtagalog ang opisyal. Sinabi niya na dati-rati raw noong 30 taon na ang nakakaraan nang huli siya napunta dito sa Pilipinas ay siya lamang daw ang Koreanong nandito. Pero kanina, nagtagalog siya at sinabi niyang ang daming nagbago, ang dami ng Koreano. Sa speech kanina ng World Bank Group President, sinabi niya na makapangyarihan ang platapormang ginagamit ng Aquino administration. Ito ang kampanya na kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap. Sinabi rin niya kanina sa kanyang speech na ang World Bank at Pilipinas ay magkaalyado sa pandaigdigang laban sa kahirapan at sinabi rin niya na magkasama ang Pilipinas at World Bank sa fight for a wiser and more capable governance. Bahagi rin ng kanyang speech kanina ang pagbanggit niya na cutting edge ang mga reformang inilalatag ng administrasyong Aquino at sinabi rin niya na maraming matututunan ang ibang bansa at maiibahagi ang Pilipinas sa ibang bansa sa mga reformang ito. Nabanggit din ni Dr. Kim ang kanilang commitment sa transparency ng Pilipinas at sinabi rin niya na ang commitment na ito ay isang beacon in Southeast Asia. Sinabi rin niya ang kanyang commitment na makikipagtulungan ang World Bank sa Pilipinas para labanan ang mga maghanap ng solusyon at labanan ang mga pagsubok na hinaharap ng gobyernong Aquino. Kanina rin ay inihayag ng World Bank leader ang pagkakaroon ng parangal bilang pagpupugay kay Jose Edgardo Campos. Isa nila itong dating empleyado na nasawi habang nag-duty. Ito po ang award na ito po ay magiging parangal daw para sa mga World Bank na mga staff na nagsisikap at nagdesisyon na bumalik sa bansa para tulungan ang kanilang bangko, ang kanilang country of origin. Kanina rin ay nag-speech, ang speech po ng World Bank Group President ay sunundan naman ng speech ni Pangulong Aquino. Speech ng Pangulo ay nabanggit niya ulit ang Disbursement Acceleration Program at muli niyang inilatag ang mga naging batayan ng gobyernong Aquino para sabihin na ito ay mabuti para sa Pilipinas. Nabanggit po ng Pangulo kanina ang mga classrooms at ang electrification project sa mga audience dito sa maghapong Daylight Dialogue. Center for Islam and Democracy. Magandang araw po, ma'am.
Magandang umaga, Elena, at sa lahat ng nakikinig at nanonood sa atin, Ramadan Karim sa inyong lahat.
Ma'am, kasama po sa mga resource persons po dito ngayong araw ang World Bank President. And I know, ma'am, na malaki po ang tinutulong ng World Bank sa inyong rehiyon, sa Mindanao. Can you elaborate on this, ma'am?
Well, the World Bank has been helping development in Mindanao for a very long time. Whether you're talking about education or health, infra, the World Bank has been there. But this time specifically, the World Bank has been supporting the crafting of the Bangsamoro Development Plan. And that is being organized by the Bangsamoro Development Agency. When the transition comes from the present autonomous region for Muslim Mindanao to the new entity called the Bangsamoro, it is best that you have a well-crafted plan in place. Otherwise, the sources of funds, the funds that are going to come in for Muslim Mindanao will be dissipated. The World Bank is now the lead institution in bringing together other multilaterals and bilaterals to work with the Bangsamoro Development Agency in crafting the plan. And we're very happy that the bank is doing this, obviously because of their track record and their experience in sustainable development, as well as in making sure that the marginalized are provided the assistance. So this is a marriage of the requirements of the ordinary citizen who has been marginalized and oppressed for the longest time to the requirements of business and investment, whom obviously the Bangsamoro need to invest in the new region if we want to be sure that we are going to be independent and autonomous. You need a strong economic base to be politically autonomous.
Yung pong kinakraft nyo na plan, saan po siya unang nakasentro po?
Ang kwan nito is the autonomous region for Muslim Mindanao na magiging Bangsamoro region. So we're talking at the focus will be Maguindanao, Lanao del Sur, Sulu, Basilan, and Tawi-Tawi. But apart from that, syempre mag-i-spill over din yan dun sa mga other areas where you have dominant Muslim populations. Lanao Norte, syempre magbe-benefit din yan. Part of Zamboanga because you've got 40% Muslim population. So lahat yan magbe-benefit if you do have a strong development program for the Bangsamoro.
Ma'am, you're one of the participants po ngayong araw na ito. Sabi po nila mga 300 daw po ang mga nandito. So ma'am, ano po yung ine-expect nyo na mangyayari at mapapakinggan nyo ngayong araw given na ang daming resource persons po ngayong araw?
I'm particularly keen on listening to the thoughts of the new World Bank president because he's Asian, his background is health, and these are critical considerations for the Philippines and for the Bangsamoro region. Somebody who came from outside the traditional sources of presidents of the World Bank may have an appreciation for what countries like the Philippines, especially those coming from conflict, are going to be facing. And the World Bank president, if he's going to be talking about governance and its relationship to development, I think we'll have a lot of valuable advice and experiences that can be shared with people like us who come from the Bangsamoro region.
Ma'am, meron pong question and answer part etong dialogue na ito. Do we expect you to be an active participant in this Q&A portion?
I think for this session, I will listen and learn.
Well, ma'am, marami pong salamat. Mga kaibigan, si Amina Rasul po ang presidente ng Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy. Sa mga sandaling ito po ay naiipon na ang mga participants ng Daylight Dialogue sa baba ng Malacañan Palace. Ito po ang Heroes Hall para sa luncheon kasama si Pangulong Aquino at ang bisita na World Bank President na si Dr. Kim. Balikan ko lamang po kanina yung naging speech ni Pangulong Aquino. Minention po ng Pangulo ang pinaglagakan ng mga DAP projects at nabanggit po niya na ang iba dito ay napunta sa mga classrooms at pati na rin sa electrification program ng pamahalaan. Pero bago po ito ay paunlakan po muna natin ang isang panayam kanina rin na ginawa namin sa opisyal ng World Bank na kasama ni Dr. Kim dito sa palasyo ng Malacañang. Kasama naman po natin sa pagkakataong ito si Ms. Chio Kanda. Siya po ang Manager of Portfolio and Operations ng World Bank. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Ma'am, can you describe to us the relations of the Philippines and World Bank since World Bank has been known in helping the Philippines in most of the projects here?
Thank you. Well, it has been a very good and productive partnership. We recently discussed at our board our new country partnership strategy for the World Bank Group. And that lays out our key areas of partnership and operations here. That stands with basically based on the Philippines development plan under the Aquino administration. And we have a quite active program in many areas. Of course, with the good governance as one of the centerpiece, because that has been the key platform of the Aquino government. And we have a major support in the disaster risk management. Also, we help on the conflict at Bangsamoro area. And we have various programs in the social sectors like conditional cash transfer, education, as well as the transport and the agriculture sector and rural development. So it's been really a privilege to work with a government with really committed to inclusive growth, and the partnership has been quite close and productive.
How significant is the visit of your president in the Philippines and his talk with our president?
Yes, the president is the meeting the President Aquino this morning. So yesterday he visited later. Yes. So that went very well, and then he visited with the Secretary Dinky Suleiman, and he had a very good visit, visiting several areas where the reconstruction and recovery is happening. And then today he's here in Manila, meet with the president, come here for the address. And I think this marks a very a good time, because now also the World Bank Group reorganized as of July 1st so that we can better serve the countries like Philippines, bringing in the global knowledge and global practices in various areas. And so this also shows the World Bank Group's commitment, the President's visit here, and then basically reaffirm our partnership and support.
Will you be joining both leaders when they hold bilateral talks later?
Not myself, but then I'll join the lunch. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Ito po si Ms. Chio Kanda, ang Manager of Portfolio and Operations ng World Bank.
Thank you.
Nakikita niyo po ngayon na unti-unti nang naiipon ang mga bisita dito sa palasyo sa Heroes Hall ng Malacañang para po sa luncheon in honor of the guest, ang panauhing pangdangal dito sa palasyo na si Dr. Kim, ang presidente ng World Bank Group. Kanina po sa speech ni Pangulong Aquino ay nabanggit niya na ang buong listahan ng mga Disbursement Acceleration Program projects ay makikita po sa www.gov.ph. Ito po ang official website ng official gazette. Sa speech po ng Pangulo kanina, inilahad niya na mahigit 50% ng pondo mula sa DAP ay napunta sa 3 ahensya. Ito po ang Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, ang Department of Public Works and Highways at National Housing Authority. Ayon sa Pangulo, ang BSP ay mayroong deficit na 40 million at 40 billion ang deficit ng Bangko Sentral, at mula sa DAP, inilaan dito ang 30 billion pesos. Sa Department of Public Works and Highways naman daw po ay 33 billion mula sa DAP ay ginamit para sa road projects, mga tulay at flood control projects. 11 billion naman mula sa pondo ng DAP ay nilaan ng Pangulo at ng gobyerno sa National Housing Authority, kung saan ay 700 mga bahay ang naipatayo para sa lugar ng North Triangle sa Quezon City. Ito rin ay ginamit sa mahigit 21,000 bahay ng informal settlers, pati na rin sa 1,000 mga residente ng Iloilo para sa kanilang river resettlement project. At mahigit 2,400 bahay naman ang naipatayo mula sa DAP para sa BJMP at Bureau of Fire Protection. Sinabi rin kanina ng Pangulo sa kanyang speech na nakatulong sa ekonomiya ng bansa ang DAP. Ayon sa Pangulo, ang GDP ng bansa ay nagbago sa loob ng mahigit 20 taon. Taong 1990 hanggang 1999 ay nasa 2.8% lamang ang GDP growth. Pero pagdating ng 2000 hanggang 2009 ay naitala ang average na 4.5% na GDP. Pero pagdating ng Administrasyong Aquino, mula 2010 hanggang 2013 ay pumalo na ito sa average na 6.3%. Ayon sa Pangulo, ang epekto ng desisyon ng Korte Suprema tungkol sa DAP ay maglalagay sa mga proyekto ng gobyerno sa paralysis. Aminado siya na mahirap tanggapin ang desisyon ng Korte Suprema, pero dahil daw ito daw ay against the benefit of the countrymen. Pero kanina rin sa kanyang speech ay inulit ng Pangulo ang sinabi niya kahapon na maghahain ang Malacañang ng motion for reconsideration. Ayon sa Pangulo, gusto niyang makipagtulungan ang ehekutibo sa isang co-equal branch ng government na patungkol po sa Korte Suprema. Sinabi rin ng Pangulo na sana rin daw ay maisip ng Korte Suprema na pagsilbihan ang 78 milyong Pilipino na bumubuo sa ating populasyon ngayon. Kanina po ay kanina ng Pangulo ay ang pagsuporta niya sa pagpasa ng Freedom of Information Bill. Malaki po ang naitulong ng World Bank sa Pilipinas, lalo na sa mga proyekto sa ating bansa. Ilan lamang sa mga pautang na iniabot ng World Bank sa Pilipinas ay ang 300 milyong dolyar na Development Policy Loan o DPL noong taong 2013. Ito ay para tulungan ang bansa sa pagpapalawig ng mga reforma sa inclusive growth at paggawa ng mas maraming trabaho. Ang DPL ay nagbibigay ng quick disbursing assistance sa mga bansang may mga inisyatibo pagdating sa reforma. Ang loan na ito ay sumusuporta sa mga polisiya at institutional changes na kailangan ng isang bansa for a sustainable and equitable growth. Bukod dito, nag-abot din ng 300 milyong dolyar na assistance ang World Bank ngayong taon para suportahan ang 4 na milyong estudyante sa ating bansa. Ito ay sa ilalim ng Learning, Equity and Accountability Program Support Project o LEAPS Project. Sa tulong na ito ng World Bank, magagawa ng Department of Education na mapaunlad ang basic education agenda ng gobyerno. Bukod dito, hindi lang nito matutulungan ang mga estudyante, kundi maging ang mga guro. Ilan sa mga target beneficiaries ng LEAPS ang mga guro, public school students, students from indigenous communities, children with disabilities, children living in remote or difficult to reach locations, at saka out-of-school youth mula sa Regions 5, 8, 9, CAR at Caraga na itinuturing na mahihirap na rehiyon sa bansa. As of January 2014, naabot sa $2.9 billion ang loan ng Pilipinas sa World Bank para pondohan ang 18 proyekto ng ating bansa sa iba't ibang sektor. Kabilang na dito ang ilang infrastructure projects, social protection projects, health projects, basic education, rural development, and environment projects. Sa taong ito, 3 proyekto ang inaprobahan ng World Bank. Ito ay ang Philippines Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative Implementation na may 20 milyong dolyar na loan, ang LEAPS at ang Philippines National Community-Driven Development Program na nagkakahalaga ng $663.9 million. Kanina sa araw pong ito ay maghapon itong daylight dialogue na gaganapin dito sa palasyo ng Malacañang. At nakikita po natin ngayon sa ating mga screen na unti-unting na pong napupuno ang Heroes Hall ng palasyo para po sa luncheon in honor of Dr. Kim, ang presidente ng World Bank Group. Nakikita po natin si Mr. Ramon Del Rosario, ang presidente ng Makati Business Club, na kanina lamang po ay nagtanong sa question and answer portion ng dito po sa nagaganap na daylight dialogue. Dumating na po si Pangulong Aquino sa Heroes Hall ng palasyo kasama si Dr. Kim para po sa luncheon na inaalay niya sa kanyang bisita. Tunghayan na po natin ang speech ng Pangulo.
Fittingly encapsulated in the World Bank's vision, a world free of poverty. I submit that in either of our positions, working towards such a vision is a difficult task, especially given the circumstances we had to contend with when we assumed our respective offices. We were confronted by the ever-changing dynamics of an uncertain world economy, the persisting reality of inequality, and the clamor of peoples all around the world for a more inclusive economic system, one that leaves no one behind. These circumstances, however, failed to discourage us. In fact, this made us all the more determined to end the scourge of poverty. This is because we know full well that the challenge of development can only be hurdled if we have the resolve to pursue much-needed reform and encourage even more people to walk alongside us along the path to progress. Dr. Kim, you yourself have demonstrated this in your own work as a medical doctor, public health expert, and leader, whether in finding low-cost methods to treat infectious diseases in developing nations, in helping combat HIV and AIDS throughout the world, or even in accelerating and directing the World Bank's efforts towards improving economic growth and stability, public health, transparency, and innovation in vulnerable countries and communities. Such efforts are most clearly seen in the World Bank's programs in the Philippines. They have helped enhance our capacity to strengthen public-private partnerships and contributed to the improvement of livelihood opportunities for vulnerable urban communities. The World Bank also continues to assist my countrymen affected by Typhoon Haiyan in rebuilding their lives and communities, expand health services for those in the margins, and also extend support to my administration in creating mechanisms fundamental to realizing the objectives of the Open Government Partnership, particularly through the Open Data Philippines initiative. All these, without doubt, complement my administration's strategy to do right by our people, accelerate meaningful economic growth, and instill a culture of integrity, excellence, and inclusiveness. Indeed, the partnership we share serves as a firm foundation as my country works to build back better and as we open more doors of opportunity for the Filipino people. I look forward to deepening this partnership with you, Dr. Kim, and the entire World Bank Group. On this note, may I ask everyone to now rise and join me in a toast. Firstly, to the greater success of Dr. Jim Yong Kim and the World Bank Group. Second, to the further growth and development of the Filipino people and of all nations of goodwill. And lastly, to the realization of our shared vision of a world that is free from poverty and injustice, a world in which no one is left behind. In this country, we say, mabuhay.
Thank you so much, President Aquino. I just want to, on behalf of the World Bank Group, and for all of us who've been watching your administration and the courageous steps that you've been taking to make reforms and to fight corruption, we thank you. As an example for the entire world, you've helped us understand just what is possible if you bring courageous leadership together with a vision for your people. What you have done in terms of openness, what you have done in terms of fighting corruption, what you've done in an area very close to my heart, which is invest in your people and their health and their education, is truly an example for everyone. And moreover, what we want, the message we want to bring very loudly to the Philippines is that each of those things you're doing are not only the right thing to do, but they're laying the foundations for your economic growth in the future. And we are absolutely certain that the impact of your administration will be felt far beyond the 6 years that you have as president. And we commit today to doing everything we possibly can to help you succeed over the next 1 year and 11 months is what we understand that you have, and 15 days. I truly believe, and having traveled extensively in Asia, having been born in Korea, having now traveled to many, many countries in the world, I simply want to make a toast to the future of Asia, a future of the Philippines as the next great miracle coming out of Asia. To the Philippines. Thank you. And to you. Thank you. Yeah.
po ang mga speeches sa naging toast ni Pangulong Aquino at ng bisita ngayong araw na si Dr. Jim Yong Kim, ang presidente ng World Bank Group. Magpapatuloy pa po ang mga activities dito sa loob ng Palasyo ng Malacañang. Magkakaroon po ng second at third session ang Daylight Dialogue na nagaganap ngayong araw. Ang Daylight Dialogue ay isang forum na binubuo ng tatlong plenary na nakasentro sa renewing trust in government at enhancing citizen engagement. Ang dialogue na ito po ay nagsimula matapos ang Good Governance Summit noong January 2014, that is early this year. Ito ay suportado ng World Bank, ng Department of Budget and Management, Department of Finance, Office of the Presidential Spokesperson at Presidential Communications, Development and Strategic Planning Office. Mamaya po sa second session ay matutunghayan po ng mga resource speakers sina DILG Secretary Mar Rojas, si Presidential Spokesperson Edwin Lacerda, si Commissioner John Philip Sevilla ng Bureau of Customs, si Commissioner Kim Jacinto Henares ng BIR, at si Budget Secretary Florencio Abad. Mamaya naman po ay susundan ito ng pangatlong sesyon na pangungunahan naman ni Justice Secretary Leila de Lima at Sherisa P. Nuesa, ang dating Managing Director ng Ayala Corporation. Magiging resource person din po sa third session si Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales at si Maria Gracia Polido-Tan ng Commission on Audit. At sumain niyo po ang ating special live coverage sa tulong po ng People's Television Network, IBC 13, at Radyo ng Bayan, lalong-lalo na ng RTVM. Ako po si Elena Luna. Magandang araw po.